Kenichi Yamada is a 35-year-old hardcore gamer who feels completely disappointed after beating a game that shuts down its servers. He complains about the game being garbage and actively searches the internet for a new challenge that will take him thousands of hours to complete. He stumbles upon a mysterious fantasy game promising endless gameplay and ultimate despair. Intrigued, he checks the difficulty settings and immediately skips easy and normal to select hell mode. The game warns him that leveling up will require 100 times more experience points than usual. This only makes him more excited. He browses the character classes and notices he can even pick a demon lord. However, his eyes land on the summoner class. It has an 8-star difficulty rating and forces the player to start as a lowly serf. Realizing the class is still in alpha testing, he decides it sounds like the perfect challenge and clicks yes to start the game. Instantly, a blinding light flashes from his monitors and his consciousness is pulled through a strange ethereal space. He briefly feels relaxed in the warm void before the space tightens around him. He wakes up crying in a rustic stone cabin. A woman with long blonde hair and a man with green hair happily hold him, revealing they are his new parents. Kenichi realizes he has been literally reincarnated into the game world as a baby. His new father, Rodan, decides to name him Alan. A year passes in his new life. Alan quickly figures out that the world uses Japanese as its common language, making it easy for him to understand everything around him. He learns that his parents are serfs living in a frontier village, which perfectly matches the starting conditions he selected for the summoner class. Rodan is a hard-working man who provides for the family. His mother, Teresa, is incredibly kind and caring. Despite enjoying the simple life of being fed and pampered, Alan is eager to test his new gaming abilities. Every night, after his parents go to sleep, he tries to open his status window. He spends an entire year attempting to activate his powers with no success. One night, after his mother tucks him into bed, he waits until the room is quiet and tries again. He reaches his hands into the air and demands his grimoire to appear. To his absolute shock, a massive black book materializes from a bright blue light and drops right onto his bed. The sudden flash wakes up his parents. They rush over to check on him. Alan quickly hides the book and pretends to be asleep. His parents assume he was just having a nightmare and go back to bed. Once the coast is clear, Alan summons the book again and opens it. The pages glow with sparkling stars and display his level 1 summoner stats. He sees that he has extremely low base stats, with only 4 health points and 2 magic points. His attack is 1, his endurance is 1, his agility is 2, his intelligence is 3, and his luck is 2. The book also lists his available skills as summon, create, and delete. He notices a message from Elmia, the god of creation. The message acts as an apology letter from the game administrator. It explains that his grimoire was delayed for a whole year because the summoner class is still in the testing phase and required extra paperwork. The administrator also clearly states that no class cancellations or changes are allowed. Alan brushes off the apology and focuses on his abilities. He sees that he can currently only use H-rank insects and beasts. Eager to try, he commands the book to summon an insect. Nothing happens. He repeatedly shouts the command, but the room remains empty. Realizing that the game provides no tutorials or guides, he figures he has to experiment. He deduces that he needs to use the Create skill before he can summon anything. He uses the Create skill for an insect. A black card featuring a grasshopper appears on the pages. The book confirms he has created one H-rank insect card. Excited by the progress, he prepares to summon the creature, but he notices his mother checking on him from the doorway. He quickly pretends to be asleep again and decides to save the summoning for the next day. The following afternoon, while his father is out chopping wood and his mother is washing clothes, Alan sits alone in his room and opens the grimoire. He uses the grasshopper card and shouts the summon command. The book erupts with crackling blue electricity and blinding white light. Dozens of glowing orbs fill the room, forcing Alan to shield his eyes. When the light fades, a massive green grasshopper stands on the wooden floor in front of him. Alan tries to give it basic commands, but the giant bug just stands there completely unresponsive. He checks the grimoire for more information and sees the creature's stats. He decides to name the grasshopper Denka. As he reads further, he discovers that having the summon active provides him with stat buffs. Denka gives him a 1-point increase in both endurance and agility. Alan checks his own status window and is thrilled to see his personal stats instantly go up. He cheers loudly, which alerts his mother. Teresa rushes into the room and screams in terror when she sees the giant bug. She immediately stomps on Denka, crushing the summon completely. Alan watches in horror as his first creation is destroyed, but he quickly recovers and continues experimenting. Over the next few days, he creates an H-rank beast card. He summons a small white mouse and names it Korosuke. Just like the grasshopper, the mouse is completely mindless, but it grants him different stat buffs. It increases his health and attack power. He also learns that his summons have special abilities, like the grasshopper's hop and the mouse's scurry, which they execute perfectly when commanded. Digging deeper into the system, Alan discovers a massive advantage. He can hold up to 10 summon cards for each creature type in his inventory. By stocking 10 mouse cards at once, he gains a massive 10-point boost to his attack stat. This single discovery makes him significantly stronger than any normal baby. He realizes that mastering these stat buffs is the key to dominating the world. However, he also remembers the brutal reality of Hell mode. He needs 100 times more experience points to level up, which means his grind will be absolutely grueling. 10 months pass, and autumn arrives in the village. Rodin returns home one afternoon covered in blood. Teresia panics, but Rodin laughs and explains it is just monster blood from a successful hunt. Since the farming season is over, the village men spend the fall hunting monsters to survive the winter. Rodin reveals they took down a massive great boar. Alan gets excited and begs to see the monster. Rodin puts Alan on his shoulders and carries him out of the village to the hunting grounds. Along the way, Rodin points out a flock of albaharan birds flying across the sky. He explains that he named Alan after these birds because they represent true freedom, soaring wherever they want. Rodin admits Teresia hated the idea of naming their son after a monster, but he still hopes Alan will grow up to be free. They arrive at the forest clearing where the village men are butchering a gigantic brown boar with massive white tusks. Alan is amazed by the sheer size of the beast. They run into their neighbor, Gerda. Gerda is a large bearded man who is celebrating the successful hunt. He introduces himself to Alan. Gerda mentions that his own daughter, Krina, is the exact same age but nowhere near as well behaved. Alan asks about the boar's strength. Gerda explains that great boars are C-rank monsters and require at least 20 armed men to defeat. Alan uses this information to establish a benchmark for his own strength. He realizes he has a long way to go before he can fight monsters. When Alan turns 3 years old, his relentless grinding finally pays off. A notification appears in his grimoire stating that his summon and create skills have reached level 2. He excitedly opens his stat page and sees he has unlocked a new fusion skill, an expansion skill that doubles his card inventory, and a memo function that acts as a notebook. He immediately tries to use the fusion skill by combining 2 mouse cards. The grimoire flashes an error message stating he lacks the necessary magic points. He gets frustrated because his magic points are completely full, meaning his current maximum capacity is simply too low to use fusion. He curses the extreme difficulty of Hell mode and decides to just create a new G-rank card instead. The system denies that action as well for the exact same reason. He realizes he needs to level up his base stats further before utilizing his new skills. After grinding more levels and increasing his magic capacity, Alan finally manages to use the fusion skill outdoors. He combines an insect card and a beast card. A bright light flashes, and a G-rank bird card appears. He summons the bird, names it Chappie, and discovers it has a unique voice mimicry ability that perfectly copies his speech. He realizes this will be incredibly useful for tricking enemies. He continues fusing cards and creates a G-rank frog named Pianta that can provoke targets and a G-rank mole named Mogasuke that can dig massive pitfall traps. By mixing and matching these creatures, Alan builds a versatile team and learns exactly how to manipulate their buffs to maximize his own stats. He feels fully immersed in the hardcore gaming experience. However, his newfound power is quickly put to the test during his daily playdates with Krina. They play a game called Dueling Knights in a field using wooden swords. Despite Alan equipping all his agility buffs to increase his speed, Krina completely overpowers him. She lunges forward with incredible speed. She strikes his weapon so hard that his wooden sword shatters into pieces. Alan falls to the dirt ground. He is absolutely shocked that a 3-year-old girl is naturally stronger than his magically enhanced stats. He concludes that Krina is completely overpowered. Later that evening, Alan helps his pregnant mother carry harvested potatoes. During dinner around the hearth, Alan insists on helping with the heavy farm work to make things easier for his parents. Rodin immediately shoots the idea down. He explains that serf labor is brutal and grueling. He refuses to let his young son suffer through it before it becomes absolutely necessary. Rodin wants Alan to enjoy his freedom while he still can. Rodin also mentions that he saw Alan throwing rocks at trees in the backyard. Alan claims he was just practicing to protect his mother from monsters. In reality, he was trying to figure out if he could learn physical combat skills outside of his summoner class. Rodin finds the excuse adorable and tells Alan to protect Krina as well. Teresia chimes in, saying she cannot wait for the appraisal ceremony. She explains that when children turn 5, they undergo a divine ceremony to determine their innate talents. A good talent can instantly elevate a person out of the serf class and change their entire life. This gives Alan a new goal to strive for. Winter blankets the village in heavy snow. Alan continues his training outdoors, using his mole to dig craters and testing how long his summons can stay active in the freezing cold. He discovers he can maintain a summon for a full 24 hours without draining extra magic. During another intense practice duel with Krina, he manages to dodge her heavy mallet swings, proving his agility buffs are paying off. After the fight, Krena runs home, and Rodin returns from gathering supplies. Teresia steps outside to welcome him back. Suddenly, Denka the giant grasshopper jumps out of the snow and latches onto Teresia's leg. Alan realizes he forgot to dismiss his summon. Teresia screams in pure terror. The massive shock instantly sends her into labor. Rodan panics and quickly carries her inside while instructing Krena to run and fetch her mother. Alan feels incredibly guilty and crouches by the fire inside the house, desperately blowing air into the kiln to heat water. He wishes he had played a medical simulator game as he listens to his mother scream in pain. Rodan sits by the bed holding Teresia's hand, completely lost on what to do next. Finally, Gerda and his wife Matilda burst through the door. Matilda immediately takes charge. She kicks all the men out of the room so she can deliver the baby. Alan, Rodan, and Gerda wait nervously outside in the freezing cold. They huddle under blankets against the stone wall. Eventually, Rodan is called back inside. He emerges with a massive smile and announces that Teresia successfully gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The family gathers around the bed to look at the newborn. Rodan decides to name the baby Mash. Teresia jokingly warns him not to name this child after a monster too, making everyone laugh. Standing in the warm cabin surrounded by his new family, Alan reflects on his past life. He knows he left behind a pathetic, broke, and lonely existence. He originally planned to treat this new world purely as a game, hoarding the best equipment and using his gamer knowledge solely for his own selfish gain. As he looks at his hardworking father, his loving mother, and his crying baby brother, his perspective completely shifts. He decides he loves this family and refuses to let them suffer as lowly serfs forever. Alan vows to use his overpowered summoner abilities and his hardcore gaming dedication to break the entire family out of poverty and give them the best life possible. Rodan and Alan stand in a vast field of yellow crops under a clear blue sky. Alan asks his father about the appraisal ceremony. Rodan explains that it is a special event for everyone. He says that people from serfs to nobles must participate when they turn 5 years old. Rodan tells Alan that if he has a talent, he might be able to rise out of serfdom. He warns Alan that he has many rivals because many children are turning 5. Gerda calls out to them. He carries his pink-haired daughter Krena on his shoulders. Krena is the same age as Alan. They walk together down a dirt path towards the commoner village. Krena looks at the houses and expresses her amazement. Alan observes the village and notes the stone buildings. Krena declares that she wants to be appraised as a swordswoman so she can become a knight. Gerda laughs and wishes her luck. They arrive at a large brick church. The church has twin towers and green roofs. Many people gather in front of the entrance. Alan notices that the commoners are dressed much better than his family. A blonde woman comforts her nervous son in the crowd. A villager points out Alan and comments on his dark hair and dark eyes. The villager assumes Alan is a serf. Alan hears this and confirms to himself that he is a serf. Large wooden doors open to reveal 3 figures in white and purple hooded robes. The officials welcome the crowd. One official explains that Elmea, the god of creation, blesses everyone equally with opportunity. The official mentions that some heroes in their country trace their lineage back to serfdom. The villagers act surprised to hear this. The official gives examples like Clasis the Saintess and Diverg the Sword Lord. Alan realizes that these legendary classes require players to start from a low social class. He remembers this rule from the game configurations. He thinks it makes perfect sense that everyone must undergo the ceremony. The officials invite the crowd inside. Gerda cheers and leads the way. They enter a grand hall filled with wooden pews and stone pillars. 3 statues stand at the altar. Alan identifies the middle statue as Elmea. He recalls receiving a letter from the game developers apologizing for his delayed class selection. The head official announces the start of the appraisal ceremony. He calls the village chieftain Deboji and his son Palomas to the front. The official instructs Palomas to place his hand on a glowing blue crystal ball. He explains that the crystal will appraise his talent and display the results on a large metal plate. Palomas steps up nervously. Deboji watches with a worried expression. Palomas touches the crystal ball. His stats appear on the black slab. The results show various letter ranks and reveal his talent as a merchant. Deboji shouts with joy and hugs his son. He is thrilled that Palomas has a talent. Alan observes the slab and realizes it looks exactly like the stat page in his grimoire. He notes that the attributes use letter ranks instead of numbers. He figures that having any talent is a cause for celebration since many people get nothing. The official calls the next boy. The boy touches the crystal and gets no talent. Another boy tries and receives a talent. The official calls a boy named Dogora. Dogora steps up and touches the crystal. The room fills with purple light. His results appear on the board. Dogora gets the axe user talent. He jumps up and celebrates with his father. The official notes that Dogora received an A rank in attack power. Alan deduces that higher stat ranks are locked behind having a specific talent. The official continues appraising people. Many receive no talent. Finally, the official calls Krina to the front. Krina runs up to the pedestal. She touches the glowing blue orb. The orb emits brilliant beams of light that illuminate the entire room. Gerda looks on in shock. The official stares at the board with wide eyes and calls it a miracle. Gerda nervously asks what Krina's talent is. The official announces that Krina has the talent of a sword lord. He explains that it is one of the best talents in existence. Gerda bursts into tears of joy. He excitedly grabs Krina's shoulders and tells her she hit the talent jackpot. Krina looks confused and complains that she wanted to be a swordswoman instead. Gerda ignores her and happily chants Sword Lord over and over. Alan is not surprised by this revelation. He thinks Sword Lord is the only class that justifies her overpowered strength. The official calls Alan to the front. Rodin encourages his son. Alan steps up with determination. He expects his parents to finally learn he is a summoner. He touches the large blue orb. The orb flashes with intense light and then suddenly disappears. Bright cyan rays shoot across the room. Alan falls to the floor. Rodin rushes over to check on him. Alan sits up and says he is fine. He asks the official for his talent. Rodin respectfully asks the official to read the board since they cannot read. The official hesitates and looks concerned. He finally reveals that Alan has no talent. Alan screams in shock. He looks up at the large black slab. His stats display all E ranks for health, magic, attack, endurance, intelligence, and luck. His talent section shows a string of glitched text. Alan realizes the text is a bug. He curses the game developers for failing to debug their game. He is furious that his summoner class will remain a secret. Rodin gently tells Alan it is time to go home to his mother. They walk back to their small stone house. Teresia waits outside with baby Mash. She welcomes them home. Inside the house, the family sits around a warm fire. Rodin and Teresia comfort Alan. They tell him that talents do not matter and that he is their pride and joy. Mash playfully pinches Alan's cheek. Alan appreciates his family. He feels happy to be born into this household despite their poverty. Later that night, Alan lies awake on his futon while his brother sleeps. He summons his grimoire and analyzes his situation. He thinks about the other 5-year-olds at the ceremony. He assumes they are all level 1 like him. He figures the rank system dictates stat growth upon leveling up. He remembers the extreme difficulty of Hell Mode. The game requires 100 times more experience points to level up. Alan realizes his E ranks reflect his significantly slower growth rate. He understands that his progress is a fraction of the normal pace. He accepts the hardcore grind and looks forward to proving his gaming skills. However, he remains angry about the glitched talent text. He yells at his book and vows to complain to the developers. He refuses to be underestimated as a gamer. The next day, Rodin walks through the village with a heavy basket on his back. Alan asks Teresia why his father seems upset. Teresia explains that Rodin has been acting strange since coming home late the previous night. That evening, the villagers gather at Gerda and Matilda's house to celebrate Krina's talent. Matilda sits with Teresia and the children. She mentions that Krina's Swordlord talent is worth celebrating. Krina excitedly tells Alan that Swordlord is even better than Swordswoman. She promises to get even stronger. Alan pretends to be surprised and praises her. Matilda brings out a large yellow jug of sake. She explains that the village chieftain gifted it to them for the celebration. Rodin tells Gerda to open the jug and drink first since he is the guest. Gerda refuses to drink because Rodin has a sour look on his face. Gerda accuses Rodin of being a buzzkill. He insists he is happy for Krina. They raise their wooden cups and toast to Krina's success. Suddenly, Gerda starts yelling at Rodin. He demands to know why Rodin wants to cut ties with their family. Teresia and Matilda look shocked. Gerda argues that Krina's extraordinary talent means she can join the knighthood and become nobility. He believes she should not waste her time socializing with lowly serfs. Alan realizes Gerda is trying to do his family a favor by pushing them away so Krenna can succeed. Rodin gets furious at Gerda's logic. He grabs Gerda by the collar and calls him a blockhead. The two men press their foreheads together and shout insults. They start grappling and throwing punches. Alan asks Krina to stop them. Matilda and Teresia step in instead. They both forcefully punch their husbands in the face. Matilda stretches Gerda's cheeks while Teresia scolds Rodin. The men immediately stop fighting and bow their heads in submission. Matilda tells Alan that the two men have always been hotheads. She explains that they are childhood friends who moved to this new village 10 years ago. They built their houses together from scratch to save labor and supplies. The men finally calm down and share the liquor. They reminisce about building their homes and laugh together. The next day, Rodin and Gerda work in a field with another villager. They use long wooden poles to pry a tree stump from the ground. Another villager runs up and announces that the Order of Knights is coming to see Krenna. Rodin drops his pole in surprise. Alan and Krenna play fight with wooden swords near a fence. Dogora approaches Alan holding a spiked wooden club. Several villagers follow him. Dogora mocks Alan for having no talent and E-rank stats. He calls Alan a weakling. Krina steps between them and defends Alan. She prepares to fight Dogora. Gerda runs over and restrains Krina. He tells her to calm down. The village chief announces the arrival of the knights. Everyone scrambles to make way. A group of knights rides into the village on horseback. They wear red and white armor. The villagers cheer for the knights. Knight Captain Xenov leads the group. He is an older man with gray hair and a white goatee. He is accompanied by Vice Captain Leibrand. Deboji formally welcomes the knights. He calls Gerda and Krina to the front. Krina excitedly introduces herself as the Sword Lord. She addresses Xenov with respect. Alan watches from the crowd. He wonders if Krenna will leave the village to become a knight. He feels a little sad about the idea. Xenov looks at Krina skeptically. He asks Gerda if this is a trick to fool the local baron. Gerda denies the accusation. He explains that Krina is only 5 years old and has never touched a real sword. Xenov ignores his pleas. He commands Vice Captain Leibrand to prepare for battle. Xenov explains that falsifying appraisal results is punishable by death. He orders Krina to fight Leibrand in a fencing duel to prove her talent. He threatens to execute her and her entire family if she refuses. Gerda begs for mercy. He cries out that his daughter's life is at stake. Alan is appalled by the knight's cruelty. Leibrand draws his glowing blue sword. Krina accepts the challenge without hesitation. She happily asks if she gets to use a real sword. Leibrand hands her a massive silver weapon. Gerda sweats in sheer panic. The villagers form a circle around the fighters in the town square. Krina raises her large sword high above her head. She declares herself a knight and challenges Leibrand. Leibrand accepts her challenge and introduces himself. He reveals his talent as a spear user but fights with a sword for the duel. He swings his blade downward. Krenna jumps into the air and meets his strike. Their swords clash with a bright flash of energy. The villagers watch in awe. Dogora is shocked that a 5-year-old can wield such a massive sword. Krenna and Leibrand exchange rapid blows. Bright yellow sparks fly from their weapon. Alan notes that Krina's sword mastery skill is around level 5 from their daily playfighting. However, he worries that the adult knight has a massive advantage in base stats and experience. Leibrand lunges forward with incredible speed. Krenna blocks his attack. They push against each other's blades. Krina steps firmly onto the wooden planks and holds her ground. She smiles with determination. Leibrand grits his teeth under the pressure. Suddenly, Krenna activates an extra skill. A radiant green glow envelops her body. She swings her sword with explosive force. A massive burst of yellow light erupts in front of Leibrand. The sheer power of the attack sends Leibrand flying backward. He crashes through a wooden table and gets embedded into a stone wall. Several knights rush forward and pin Gerda to the ground to stop him from interfering. Krina falls from the broken wall and lands face down in the dirt. Xenov raises his arm and declares the duel over. He orders Krenna to lower her weapon. Krenna stands up and looks around in surprise. She realizes the fight is already finished. She cheerfully thanks Leibrand for the match and calls him a strong grandpa. Leibrand feels depressed about being called old since he is only 24. The crowd of commoners erupts into massive cheers. They celebrate Krenna defeating the vice captain. Gerda breaks free and hugs Krenna tightly. He cries tears of joy because she survived. Xenov approaches Gerda. He admits there is no refuting Krina's talent. He apologizes for his boorish behavior and the harsh trial. He commends Gerda for raising a true sword lord. Xenoph invites Gerda to discuss Krena's future and allows him to bring his friends for comfort. They all head to the village chief's house for a feast. Gerda, Rodin, Krena, Alan, and Dagora sit around a large dining table filled with food. Xenoph formally introduces himself as the captain of the knights. He explains that his lord sent him to verify the Sword Lord rumor. Xenoph tells Deboji that the village will now be named Krena Village to honor her talent. Deboji enthusiastically accepts the Baron's decision. Xenoph explains his harsh methods. He reveals that a noble recently lied about having a sword lord in their family. The kingdom now thoroughly verifies all extraordinary talents to prevent fraud. Xenoph apologizes to Gerda again for putting Krena through the ordeal. He tells Gerda that Krena can attend the academy when she turns 12. He says she will eventually serve directly under the royal family. Alan finds this information fascinating. He wonders if anyone can become a knight by attending the academy. Dagora's father boasts about Dagora's axe user talent. Xenoph encourages Dagora to study hard and earn admission into the academy. Dagora promises to do his best. He then tells Alan that he needs to study with them. Dagora quickly changes his mind and insults Alan's intelligence. Krena angrily defends Alan and calls Dagora a dummy. Alan finds it amusing that 5-year-olds are arguing over him. He reminds himself that he is mentally 40 years old. Xenoph notices Alan's dark hair and dark eyes. He asks Rodin about the boy. Rodin introduces Alan as his son. Xenoph suddenly recognizes Rodin's name. He asks if he is Rodin the boar hunter. Rodin confirms his identity. Xenoph immediately apologizes for not recognizing him earlier. He pays proper respect to Rodin and calls him a village legend. Xenoph reveals that the Baron absolutely loves the great boar meat that Rodin hunts every winter. He praises Rodin for taking on the most dangerous role in the hunts and calls him a true hero. Alan smiles proudly. He realizes his father is a superstar even among the nobility. Later that evening, Rodin, Alan, and Krena walk home through the forest. The sky turns golden with the setting sun. Rodin carries Krena on his shoulders. He tells Alan that Krena might become a legendary hero someday. He expresses his pride in being recognized by the nobles despite being a serf. Rodin encourages Alan to keep working hard and promises they will strut their stuff with pride. He tells Alan that he will do great things because he carries his genes. Alan agrees with his father. He knows his hardcore gaming skills will lead him to greatness. Alan pulls out 2 pink slime creatures from his tunic. He reveals he created them as gifts for his mother and brother. Rodin laughs out loud. He shows Alan 2 identical slime creatures he also procured for the family. They laugh together and continue their walk home under the starry night sky. Alan checks his status screen and sees that his summon skill has reached level 3 and his grimoire expansion has reached level 2. He unlocks a new ability called Enhance and wonders if he can finally make his summoned creatures stronger. He gets very hyped because he also unlocks F-rank creatures and his card inventory increases from 20 slots to 30 slots. This expansion means he can equip more stat buffs to his own body. He finishes washing the dinner dishes and cleaning up the house so he can focus on experimenting with his new abilities. He sits on the floor with his pregnant mother, Teresia, his father, Rodin, and his younger brother, Mash. Teresia feels the baby kick softly and guesses she is going to have a girl. Rodin reminds her that they agreed she gets to pick the name if the baby is a girl. Alan notices his mana bar is fully restored and then receives a system message in his grimoire. The message is signed by Elmea, the god of creation. Alan accidentally reads the god's name out loud, and Rodin immediately scolds him for taking the Lord's name in vain. Alan quickly covers up his mistake and changes the subject by pointing out that a massive scar on Rodin's arm has completely healed. Rodin proudly flexes his arm and explains that he passed a trial of the gods during his boar hunt earlier that day. He tells Alan that hunters sometimes feel a sudden burst of energy that instantly heals all their wounds and completely removes their exhaustion. Alan realizes that the villagers use the term trial of the gods to describe the process of leveling up in this world. He assumes Rodin must be a very high level by now since he is a veteran hunter. Alan checks his own stats and sees he is still at level 1 with 0 experience points. He knows he will never level up unless he fights monsters. He also knows that serfs are strictly forbidden from leaving the village without permission unless they are on an official hunt. He asks Rodin if he can join the hunting party, but Rodin sternly refuses and tells him that hunting is incredibly dangerous and often costs lives. Later that night, Alan checks his grimoire while everyone else is fast asleep under their blankets. He sees that the developers finally fixed the glitched text on his status page and sent a message apologizing for the delay. He reads the update and confirms his talent is truly a summoner. He is very happy to see he has an S rank for both mana and intelligence, which perfectly suits his magical class. He figures out that the E ranks in his physical stats are simply due to the extremely slow progression of the Hell mode difficulty he selected before reincarnating. He decides to start experimenting with his new enhanced skill right away. He selects a card for his grasshopper summon named Denka and applies the enhance skill. He notes that the skill boosts the creature's endurance and agility by 1 point each, exactly matching the buffs the card provides to him. He summons the giant green grasshopper and sees it looks much tougher than before. He is excited to learn that being a summoner requires strategic stat management and not just throwing big monsters at enemies. He accidentally wakes up Teresia, who screams in terror at the sight of the giant bug in their room. Alan quickly unsummons the grasshopper and apologizes for scaring her. The next morning, Rodin packs his spear and a large sack and leaves for another boar hunt while Teresia and Alan wave goodbye. Alan finishes hanging up the laundry outside and goes back to testing his card fusions. He tries to combine an insect card and a beast card, but the fusion fails and he gets nothing. He then tries combining an insect card with a bird card. The two cards merge in a flash of bright blue light and create a brand new Grass F card. Alan is confused as to how a plant counts as a creature, but he is overjoyed when he sees the card's stats. The grass card gives him a +5 bonus to his mana and his luck. He celebrates wildly because a mana buff allows him to perform more actions every single day, which will significantly speed up his grinding process. He summons the new creature to see what it can do. The summon turns out to be a small red apple with tiny vine limbs and a single green leaf. Alan names the creature Apo and checks its abilities. He sees Apo has a special skill called Aroma. He orders Apo to use the skill and the little apple burrows deep into the dirt. A pink mist rises from the ground and a tiny green sapling sprouts up in the yard. Alan feels completely underwhelmed and thinks the skill is just a useless gardening trick. Teresia walks by carrying Mash and comments on how nice the new sapling smells. Alan agrees but secretly wonders if the creature has any actual combat value. Later in the day, Alan spars with Krina using wooden practice swords in the yard. Krina lunges at him with incredible speed and strikes him down effortlessly. Alan slides across the dirt and grits his teeth in frustration because he still cannot compete with her ridiculous sword lord strength. Krina compliments him and says he feels a bit tougher than before. Alan knows this is true because his sword mastery skill recently reached level 3, and his expanded card inventory allows him to equip more endurance and attack buffs. He wonders if Apo's Aroma skill can provide combat boosts, but then he remembers his wolf summon Fido has an actual attack skill called Chomp. He really wants to test the wolf's attack, but decides it is too dangerous to use on a human sparring partner. He changes activities and starts throwing round gray stones into a hollowed-out tree trunk to practice his throwing skill. He throws thousands of stones, but his skill level never increases. Mash sits nearby on the dirt path and complains loudly about being bored. Alan apologizes and tells him to wait just a little longer. Alan feels frustrated that he has to balance babysitting, helping his pregnant mother, and grinding his extremely slow skills. He decides the throwing practice is a waste of time and plans to focus solely on his summoning abilities instead. As he prepares to leave, he notices that the sapling Apo planted has grown into a small row of bushes. He realizes that Apo's Aroma skill actually shortens his natural mana recovery time from 6 hours to 5 hours. This small improvement means he can cycle his summons more often and gain experience faster. That night, a severe rainstorm hits the village. Rodin does not come home on time, and Teresia starts to worry. Suddenly, a group of hunters shouts from the darkness outside. They carry Rodin into the house on a wooden stretcher. Rodin is completely unconscious, covered in severe purple bruises and bleeding heavily from a massive starburst-shaped wound on his chest. Teresia and Alan are horrified by his condition. The hunters explain that Rodin took a direct hit from a boar fang to his stomach. They managed to save his life by cauterizing the wound and giving him a very rare healing herb. The hunters bought the expensive herb using the gold coins the Knight Captain gave them as an apology for testing Krina. One of the hunters, named Gerda, punches a wooden post in anger and screams that the commoners are entirely to blame for Rodin's injuries. Mash starts crying hysterically from all the shouting, so Alan gently leads his little brother into another room to comfort him. The next day, Gerda explains the full story to Teresia and Alan. The village chieftain ordered the hunters to let a group of commoners join the boar hunt because the commoners wanted a share of the valuable meat. The hunters gave the commoners the easiest job of simply holding the boar's attention while the veterans prepared a trap. However, when the massive monster burst out of the trees, the commoners panicked completely. They abandoned the strategy and ran for their lives. The boar charged straight at the fleeing commoners, and Rodin had to throw himself in front of the beast to save them. The boar impaled Rodin, but the other hunters managed to kill the monster right after. Gerda promises to bring Rodin's share of the meat and tells the family to stay strong. Alan feels immense guilt. He realizes he has been treating this world like a video game and focusing only on his personal stats while his father risked his life for their survival. He decides to stop worrying about his own power and focus entirely on protecting his family. When Rodin eventually wakes up, Gerda visits and brings a massive bundle of fresh meat wrapped in leaves. Gerda assures Rodin that the other villagers will ensure his family has enough food to survive the winter. Rodin thanks him but admits he is still in very bad shape. Alan confidently tells his father to rest and promises to take over all the heavy labor. He goes to the village well and uses the crank to pull up water. He fills 2 massive wooden buckets and lifts them using a wooden yoke across his shoulders. He easily carries the heavy load through the village. Gerda and the other villagers watch in absolute shock at his physical strength. Alan explains to himself that he swapped out all of his magical buffs for pure physical stats so he can easily handle adult chores. He knows that drawing a little attention will not matter since the village already has a famous prodigy like Krana. Later, Alan goes to the fields to help Gerda harvest sweet potatoes. Gerda shows him how to pull the roots, and Alan effortlessly rips a massive chain of potatoes right out of the soil with one hand. Gerda is amazed and notes that Alan is even stronger than he expected. While they work, the young commoner who ruined the hunt comes to the house. He bows deeply and apologizes to Rodin and Teresia, offering a basket of fresh red fruit as a peace offering. Rodin accepts the apology without any hesitation and gently tells the young man to be more careful next time. Alan is astounded by his father's extreme kindness and forgiveness. He knows his family still needs more food to survive the winter, so he decides to take matters into his own hands. He goes to a distant field filled with tall yellow flowers and summons several of his F-rank insect creatures. The creatures look like large yellow grasshoppers. Alan uses his stick to clear the area and then uses the insects to catch several colorful frogs wearing tiny golden crowns. He sets up wicker baskets propped up by sticks and ties ropes to them to create simple traps. He places the frogs under the baskets and hides in the tall grass. He plans to use the frogs to lure ducks or wild birds so he can catch enough meat for the winter. He waits patiently until a shadow falls over the field. A massive white bird with purple wings and a bright red crest lands right on top of his traps. The bird easily crushes the baskets and begins eating the frogs. Alan recognizes the creature as an alba heron, a dangerous B-rank monster. He remembers that his parents named him after this exact bird. He knows he should run away, but he checks his stats and sees his enhanced skill is now level 2. He has fully buffed all his summoned creatures and equipped his best physical stats. He decides to fight the giant bird to gain experience points and secure food for his family. He draws his wooden practice sword and charges blindly through the tall grass. He leaps into the air and strikes the alba heron with all his might. The bird easily deflects the blow and kicks Alan in the face with its massive yellow talon. Alan crashes into the dirt but quickly recovers. He summons a full pack of Fido wolves and orders them to attack. The gray and white wolves lunge at the bird and bite into its neck and wings. The alba heron screeches and unleashes a powerful blast of blue energy that instantly obliterates the entire wolf pack. Alan screams in anger and charges again, swinging his wooden sword directly at the bird. The weapon shatters into pieces against the bird's tough feathers. The alba heron retaliates by striking Alan forcefully in the chest. Alan is thrown backward and hits the ground hard. He suddenly feels incredibly weak and realizes a fatal flaw in his strategy. When his summoned creatures are destroyed by an enemy, he instantly loses all the stat buffs they provide. This mechanic drains his strength mid-fight. He lies helplessly on his back in the grass, completely stripped of his extra strength and endurance. The giant alba heron hovers directly above him and screeches aggressively, leaving him completely defenseless and facing imminent death. Alan lies in a grassy field filled with yellow flowers under a bright blue sky, while a massive white bird with blue wings and a red crest pins him down. Alan struggles against the giant yellow beak using a wooden cross-like sword. He thinks fast and summons his insect creatures, calling them Sucker. The orange bugs with glowing yellow spots fly out and latch directly onto the bird's white feathered neck to use an energy drain attack. Alan notes he is currently weaker because he lost his other summons and their stat buffs, but he decides crippling the enemy is the best strategy. He then screams for his wolf summons, calling them Fido. A pack of brown and white wolves wearing red harnesses leaps into the fray and bites into the bird's neck alongside the bugs. The giant bird screeches in pure agony. Alan jumps to his feet, grabs his wooden weapon, and lunges at the distracted bird. He strikes the bird right on the head, causing blue electricity to spark from the impact. The bird collapses and dies. A large black book appears next to Alan, and white text on the black pages confirms he defeated one Albaharan and gained 100 experience points. Alan raises his weapon and screams in victory. He feels a massive rush of excitement because he finally beat his first monster. He drags the heavy bird carcass all the way back to his house. His father Rodan, his mother Teresia, his friend Krina, and Krina's father Gerda stand outside the stone wall and stare at the giant beast with wide eyes and absolute shock. His father asks how he managed to kill a D-rank monster. Alan decides to lie to protect his secrets and claims the bird simply landed nearby, so he took it by complete surprise. Gerda steps closer to examine the white furry carcass and notices several dog-like bite marks all over the bird's neck. He jokingly asks if Alan bit the monster to death. Alan panics internally but quickly covers his tracks by forcing a smile and claiming he fought on pure instinct and cannot remember exactly what happened. Everyone believes his story. Gerda hangs the giant bird upside down from a wooden structure and slices it open to let the blood drain into a long dirt trench. He teaches Alan about monster anatomy, explaining that an Albaharan weighs 60 kilos but only drops to 20 kilos after bleeding and drying. He says only half of that is edible meat, but the blue wings are extremely valuable. However, Gerda reveals that they must surrender 60% of the monster to the upper class as a tax. Alan is shocked that the tax applies to wild monsters. Gerda extracts a small purple magic crystal from the carcass and explains that magic stones from D-rank monsters are also taxed. Gerda then shares a clever idea and tells Alan that they can use his father's severe hunting injury as leverage to negotiate a better deal with the village chief. Alan loves the idea and whispers a plan to Gerda. They travel to the chieftain's grand residence, where the chief sits on a fancy chair in a room with red carpets and purple curtains wearing thick gold rings on his fingers. Gerda offers the wings and the magic stone to cover the tax. The chief immediately complains that the baron demands even more meat this year and pressures them to deliver. Gerda gets aggressive and reminds the chief that Rodan almost died because the chief forced useless commoners to join the hunt. He yells that Rodin's family is now on the verge of starving to death because of the chief's terrible orders. Alan plays his part perfectly by grabbing his head, complaining about being dizzy from starvation, and pretending to faint. Gerda catches Alan and demands to know who is to blame for this tragedy. The chief feels immense guilt and instantly caves under the pressure, allowing Gerda and Alan to keep all the meat from the bird. Alan drops his dizzy act, smiles widely, and thanks the chief. He then cleverly asks the chief to confirm that this deal allows them to keep the meat for any future Albaharans they catch. The chief completely falls for the trap and agrees to the terms before realizing he just got hustled. Gerda and Alan leave the mansion with a massive victory. Days pass and Alan goes back to hunting. He hides in the tall green grass with Krina and uses 3 crowned frogs as bait inside a large crater. 2 giant Albaharans fly down from the blue sky to eat the frogs. Alan immediately unleashes his bug summons and the red bugs latch onto the necks of both birds. The birds shriek in pain as the bugs drain their energy. Alan then summons his wolf pack, and the wolves bite and cling to the birds' necks, pinning them to the ground. Alan leaps into the air with his wooden sword and smashes the weapon down on the birds. He kills both monsters simultaneously without losing a single summoned creature and calls it a flawless victory. His floating black book updates his status, granting him 200 experience points. The book announces his experience has reached the maximum of 1000 and he levels up to level 2. Alan demands to see his stat page and notes that all his health and mana fully recover upon leveling up. He sees massive increases in his health, mana, attack, endurance, agility, intelligence, and luck. He hugs his black book tightly and celebrates in the field. He feels incredible because he finally reached his first level up after 6 years of living in this new world, and views this as passing a trial of the gods. He decides it is finally time to tell his family some of the truth. He returns to his wooden house and finds his father sitting by the fire pit. He announces he caught 2 more birds, reaching his goal of 10 monsters, and states they will have enough dried meat to survive the winter. He notes he just needs to trade some meat for firewood. Later, he spars outside with Krina, who uses her pink hand-shaped wooden sword to strike him down effortlessly. Alan knows he needs to hunt 20 more birds to reach level 3, but winter is approaching rapidly. Night completely falls over the village. Alan sits his father and his blonde mother down by the sunken hearth, puts on a serious expression, and feeds them a massive lie. He claims he received a direct oracle from Lord Elmea, the god of creation, when he was just 1 year old. He says the god blessed him with immense power and wisdom to overcome impossible trials. His parents look extremely shocked and concerned. Alan explains that his stats are incredibly high, but the god's trials severely slow down his progression. He uses this fake oracle to explain why his cheek injury healed instantly and why the village appraisal ceremony claimed he had no talent, insisting his talent is simply too new to be recognized by the crystal. His father believes every word but scolds Alan for not showing proper respect to the god's name. Alan promises to be careful. He secretly hates lying to his parents, but he knows he cannot reveal his true identity as a reincarnated gamer with the summoner class. His mother bursts into tears and pulls him into a tight hug, realizing Alan has been fighting giant monsters completely alone just to complete the god's trials. Alan promises to face the trials head-on and prove his worth. His father tells him to ask for help if he ever runs into trouble, and asks Alan to keep this oracle a secret from the rest of the village to avoid being labeled a false prophet. However, his father asks permission to tell Gerda the truth to brag about Alan because Gerda always brags about Krina being a sword lord. Alan easily agrees. Time passes and winter covers the village in deep snow. Alan is now 6 years old. He walks through the snowy stone streets with Gerda to trade supplies while carrying massive green backpacks filled with meat. Gerda explains the economic differences between serfs and commoners, stating the 60% monster tax does not apply to commoners. Instead, commoners pay a head tax of 3 gold coins per adult and 1 gold coin per child every year. Alan asks if a serf can become a commoner, and Gerda explains that a family can buy commoner status by paying a tribute of 10 gold coins per person. Alan calculates the cost in his head, realizing his family will soon have 5 members, so upgrading their status will cost 50 gold coins. They enter a trading shop, and Alan places 5 packs of Alba Heron jerky on the wooden counter to trade for a large sack of white salt. He steps outside and talks to an old fruit merchant to learn the exact bartering exchange rates. 1 bundle of jerky equals 1 bag of salt, 4 momo fruits, 1 popo fruit, or 4 days of firewood. Alan pulls up his status menu and calculates his ultimate goal, noting that 1 bundle of jerky sells for 1 silver coin, and 1 gold coin equals 100 silver coins. Saving up 50 gold coins means he has to hunt exactly 500 Alba Herons. As a hardcore gamer, he views this massive grind as an exciting challenge. He then visits a local sunlit apothecary filled with wooden drawers and blue glass bottles. He asks the bald shopkeeper in a pink vest for magical medicines that recover mana, but the shopkeeper laughs and says they do not carry anything that fancy. Alan looks at the regular healing herbs instead and uses his black book to draw the herbs, discovering the book can store visual data perfectly. He asks the shopkeeper to identify the Mulerze flower, which is the rare herb that saved his father's life. The shopkeeper gets extremely angry and complains that Gerda aggressively bargained for the last flower a month ago. Gerda dropped to his hands and knees and begged to lower the price from 5 gold coins to 3 gold coins to save his dying friend. The shopkeeper caved to the pressure but felt completely cheated. Alan realizes how much Gerda sacrificed and humiliated himself just to save his father, filling him with immense gratitude. He places a bundle of premium dried meat on the counter and gives it to the shopkeeper for free, thanking the man for saving his father's life and promising to bring more meat in the future. The shopkeeper accepts the gift and thanks him. Alan leaves the shop and looks through a weapon store window, seeing that simple metal weapons cost 50 silver coins, which equals 5 giant birds. Suddenly, a freckled boy named Dagora blocks his path in a narrow stone alley. Dagora is the son of the village blacksmith and possesses the axe user class. Dagora angrily demands that Alan become his minion. Alan refuses, drops his heavy bags, and draws his wooden sword. Dagora attacks him with a wooden club, but Alan easily dodges the slow attacks and strikes Dagora on the head with his wooden sword. He realizes Dagora hits hard but is incredibly slow compared to Krina's 3-star power. Dagora falls to the ground in pain. Alan sheaths his sword, tells Dagora he will trade at his shop someday, and walks away while Dagora screams in pure frustration. Later, the snow melts and the weather gets warmer. Alan sits in his house while his father takes off his bandages to flex his fully healed muscles. His mother holds their new baby girl named Mura. Outside in the dirt field, Alan watches Dagora spar with Krina. Krina uses her wooden sword to easily knock Dagora into the dirt, and Alan notices Krina is holding back significantly. He also watches his younger brother Mash practice with a wooden pole and realizes Mash has great potential to receive the spear user class in the future. Dagora refuses to give up and charges Krina again, but he just gets knocked down repeatedly. Night falls over the village, and Alan sits by the fire pit with his parents to admire the sleeping baby. Gerda enters the house looking extremely stressed and brings terrible news from the village chief. The Baron has officially ordered the village to hunt 15 boars before winter instead of the usual 10, and to meet this absurd quota, the chief demands that the commoners join the hunting party again. His mother is furious and terrified because the commoners are cowards who almost got her husband killed during the last hunt. Gerda says they have absolutely no choice because the Baron threatened to bring in outside serfs if they fail the quota. Alan realizes that bringing in more serfs means the village land will be divided further, which threatens the survival of everyone in Crana village. His mother cries and says the Baron expects them to hunt 20 boars next year. The men state that hunting more often is a death sentence, but disobeying the Baron is impossible. Alan listens to the adults' panic and decides to take full control of the situation. He speaks up and reminds them that he possesses the wisdom of the gods, stating he has spent countless hours playing games and optimizing weak characters. He tells the men that he knows exactly how to safely integrate weak newbies into a strong hunting party so they can gain experience without dying. He asks them to trust his strategy and let him handle the commoners. The men agree to his plan. The next morning, Alan walks out to the edge of the village with his father and Gerda. They all carry spears and wear dark fur cloaks. They arrive at the massive wooden village gates and stand confidently in front of a huge crowd of nervous commoners, ready to lead the highly dangerous hunt. Roden fully recovers from his serious injuries and leads a group of spear-wielding warriors out of the village for a highly dangerous boar hunt. Alan decides to tag along with the hunting party just to watch the action unfold. Roden explains to the group that they are officially adopting Alan's special hunting strategy for this mission. The men agree to the plan because they desperately need to train the inexperienced newbies so they can eventually split into 2 separate groups and hunt even more boars to meet the Baron's strict demands. Alan feels disappointed that his stubborn father refuses to let him actually fight in the hunt, but he knows training the rookies is the most important step right now. He watches the men head out and feels excited to finally leave the village after living as a lowly serf for 7 whole years. The group travels to a lush green field near the snowy White Dragon Mountains. The older men explain that boars always migrate to this area in the fall to search for food. They also mention a local legend about a mythical white dragon living at the mountain summit. Alan gets incredibly hyped about the fantasy elements of this world and runs to catch up with the group. The hunters eventually arrive at a large, sandy clearing surrounded by a dense forest. Rodan orders everyone to take their positions according to the plan. A massive brown boar with glowing red eyes and giant white tusks suddenly bursts out of the bushes and charges directly at the men. Alan hides behind a large tree and watches the terrifying beast in action. The bait team successfully lures the angry boar into the open area. Next, the tank team digs their heels into the dirt and uses their wooden spears to completely trap the struggling boar in place. Finally, the strike team charges forward and repeatedly stabs the trapped boar in its vital organs until blood sprays everywhere. The boar collapses and dies. Alan explains that his father and the other hunters have used this exact method to safely hunt monsters for over 10 years despite having 0 special talents. The young newbies step forward and stab the dead boar one more time to officially participate in the battle. A magical surge of power flows through the rookies, and they celebrate surviving a trial of the gods. Alan knows they just gained a massive amount of experience points because boars are high-level monsters. However, when Alan checks his floating black book, he sees that his own stats have not changed at all. He feels incredibly frustrated because the system does not reward him with any experience points just for standing nearby and giving advice. The rookies thank him for the amazing strategy, but Alan still views this successful hunt as a total defeat for his own progression. Later, Alan returns to the village and draws water from a stone well while talking to a muscular butcher. He asks the butcher to convince his dad to let him fight, but the butcher refuses because Roden would definitely beat him up for suggesting it. Alan then asks the butcher for a massive favor. He points to several giant bird carcasses hanging from a wooden structure and asks the man to butcher them all. Alan promises to pay the man with 2 packs of meat for every bird he processes. The butcher happily agrees to the deal because he loves carving up monster meat. Alan explains that he needs to outsource the butchering job so he can quickly sell the extra meat and earn the 50 gold coins required to buy his family out of serfdom. Sometime later, the hunters go out for another dangerous boar hunt in the forest. The men hide behind the trees and wait for the monsters to appear. A blonde hunter lures a massive red-eyed boar into the clearing. The hunters charge forward and use their spears to trap the aggressive beast. While the men fight the boar, Alan hides behind a tree and quietly summons a small green grasshopper. He names the bug Denka and explains that he can summon his creatures anywhere within a 50-meter radius. He intentionally places the helpless bug right in the middle of the battlefield. The raging boar accidentally steps on the summoned bug and crushes it instantly. Alan smiles widely because he knows the game mechanics consider him an active participant in the battle as long as the monster attacks one of his summoned creatures. The hunters completely destroy the boar with their spears and celebrate their victory. Alan watches his floating black book glow brightly and updates his status. He finally receives a massive amount of experience points and levels up to level 3. He celebrates his genius plan and fully embraces his hardcore gamer mindset. 3 months quickly pass by and winter covers the village in deep snow. The villagers celebrate the start of the new year. Alan and his friend Krana walk back from the village chief's large house carrying bags filled with candy and special gifts. They return to Alan's rustic wooden home and join their families around a warm fire pit. Roden grills a massive pile of meat and vegetables for everyone to enjoy. The families eat happily and discuss the village's current situation. Roden announces that they will easily meet the Baron's quota of 20 boars this year thanks to Alan's brilliant training strategy. Alan suddenly pulls out a special yellow jug filled with expensive liquor that the chief gave him. Roden and Krena's father Gerda immediately stare at the jug with intense desire because they love drinking. Alan uses the liquor to bait the 2 grown men into a trap. He tells them they can have the expensive booze if they manage to beat him in a contest. The men eagerly accept the challenge. Alan then reveals his terms and demands that they let him use a spear in the upcoming boar hunts if he wins. The men realize they walked right into a trap, but they refuse to back down from the challenge. They all agree to settle the bet with a simple arm wrestling match. Gerda steps up to the table first and promises not to hold back. Alan secretly opens his stat book and uses all of his stored Fido cards to heavily buff his own attack power. He confidently places his bandaged arm on the table and locks hands with the massive man. Krena acts as the referee and starts the match. Gerda flexes his huge muscles and tries to slam Alan's arm down, but he suddenly realizes the young boy is incredibly strong. Gerda starts sweating heavily and completely panics as Alan effortlessly overpowers him. Alan slams Gerda's hand onto the table and wins the match. Krena cheers loudly for her friend while Gerda sits there in absolute shock. Alan massages his wrist and calculates that Gerda's attack stat must be somewhere around the 200 mark. Roden steps up next and waits for Alan's arm to recover before starting the final round. Alan grabs his father's rough, calloused hand and realizes how hard his dad works to protect the family. He vows to work 100 times harder than everyone else and treats this match as a serious test of his current power. The match begins, and both of them grit their teeth and push with all their might. Alan strains his buffed muscles to the absolute limit, but Roden's sheer physical strength proves to be too much. Roden overpowers the boy and slams his hand onto the table to claim the victory. Alan happily accepts the loss and calculates that Roden's attack stat must be well over 300. He hands the yellow jug of liquor to his dad as the promised reward. The adults laugh and drink the booze together while celebrating the new year. Roden tells Alan not to feel bad because he is already incredibly strong for his age, but he strictly forbids the boy from hunting until he can actually win the arm wrestling match. Alan accepts the condition and promises to beat his dad by the fall. Meanwhile, Gerda gets drunk and starts annoying his wife Matilda. Matilda easily grabs her huge husband and pins him face down onto the wooden floor without breaking a sweat. Alan watches the crazy scene and realizes Matilda must also have insanely high stats. By June, Alan turns 7 years old, and his summon level finally goes up again. He stands in a bright sunlit field and excitedly checks his open black book. He sees that he has officially unlocked E-rank summons and a brand new fixed skill called Storage. He decides to test the strange new storage skill immediately. He looks at a solid black square on the page and pushes a large wooden branch directly into the hole. The branch completely disappears into the book. He then tosses a small gray stone into the hole. He checks his inventory menu and sees the stone floating in a magical void along with the wood and some water. He realizes he can throw anything into the hole as long as it fits, and there are absolutely no limits on the total amount of items he can store. However, his gamer instincts tell him something is very wrong. He knows game developers usually give players massive storage upgrades right before they actually need them. He figures there must be a specific reason he received this god-tier skill at this exact moment in his journey. He decides to test out his new E-rank summons to find the answer. He commands the book to create an insect E-card, but the spell completely fails. The book displays a warning message stating he does not have enough E-rank magic stones to complete the process. Alan realizes he now needs specific crafting materials to generate the higher level creatures. He remembers that he secretly hoarded a bunch of purple magic stones from the horned rabbits he killed earlier. He quietly sneaks into his house past his sleeping brother and pulls up a loose floorboard. He grabs a small brown sack filled with silver coins and retrieves one of the glowing purple magic stones. He runs back outside to the field and holds the stone in his hand while casting the creation spell again. The spell fails a second time. Alan quickly realizes he actually needs to put the crafting materials inside his new magical inventory first. He tosses the purple stone into the black hole and casts the spell a third time. The book glows with a bright blue light and successfully generates the insect E-card. He checks the stats and sees the new butterfly creature gives a massive 10-point boost to endurance and agility. He summons the creature, and a giant colorful butterfly appears right in front of him. Suddenly, his mother walks outside with the baby to ask what all the shouting is about. Alan completely panics and awkwardly hides the giant bug behind his back while making up a silly excuse. His mother calls him a total goofball and walks away. Alan breathes a huge sigh of relief and then decides to create the Beast E-summon. He uses another magic stone and summons a massive yellow saber-toothed tiger with a bright red nose and long white tusks. The giant beast licks his face playfully. Alan names the tiger Tama and notes that its stat buffs are twice as strong as the basic summons. He then dismisses the tiger and tries to use the fusion mechanic. He tries to combine the insect E-card and the beast E-card to create a bird E-card, but the book flashes a bright light and fails the synthesis completely. Alan realizes the fusion process also requires a ton of magic stones to work properly. He goes back inside and asks Rodin where he can find more horned rabbits to farm for stones. Rodin explains that the villagers dug a huge ditch around the town a few years ago, so the rabbits never come near the village anymore. Alan panics because he desperately needs more materials to level up his army. Later that day, Alan watches Krina sparring with the local blacksmith's son, Dogora, in the dirt training yard. Krina effortlessly knocks the annoying boy to the ground over and over again with her wooden sword. While Dogora cries in pain, Alan sits by a tree and asks a smart blonde boy named Pelmoas about magic stones. Pelmoas explains that magic stones are usually found near a monster's heart and are used to power fancy magic tools in the royal capital. However, Pelmoas notes that low-level E-rank stones are considered absolute trash and can be found lying all over the ground. Pelmoas hands Alan a small purple gem to prove his point. Alan realizes he just needs to scavenge around the village and ask the locals for their useless trash. He spends the next few days gathering a huge pile of magic stones from the helpful villagers. He finally manages to create all 5 of the new E-rank summons and lines them up on his book's pages. He decides to test their unique combat abilities in a large grassy clearing. He summons the bird E creature, a brown hawk named Hawk, to scout the area from the sky. The bird quickly spots a massive brown boar hiding in the tall grass. Alan orders the hawk to attack the boar, but the angry beast completely ignores the bird and charges straight at Alan. Alan trips and falls backward, scratching his arm on the ground in the process. He immediately summons the grass E creature, a small green sprout named Mamataro. The little plant uses a glowing green leaf to completely heal Alan's injury in a matter of seconds. Next, Alan summons the insect E creature, the giant butterfly named Agaha. The butterfly flutters over the angry boar and showers it with sparkling golden dust, severely debuffing the monster's stats. Finally, Alan summons his beast E creature, the fierce, saber-toothed tiger named Tama. The tiger leaps onto the weakened boar and violently bites its neck, killing it instantly. Alan cheers loudly for his incredible team. Suddenly, a second giant boar bursts out of the bushes and ambushes him from behind. Alan quickly reacts and summons his stone E creature, a massive gray golem shaped like a solid brick wall named Cabello. The giant wall blocks the charging boar perfectly and crushes the beast into the dirt. Alan stands in the middle of the field, surrounded by his entire team of magical creatures. He finally understands the true purpose of the summoner class. He realizes that every single summon type is designed to fill a very specific role in a standard role-playing party. The insect applies critical debuffs. The beast deals massive physical damage. The bird handles scouting and intelligence. The grass acts as the dedicated healer, and the stone serves as the ultimate defensive tank. Because he can summon all of these creatures at the same time, he effectively functions as an entire, perfectly balanced party all by himself. He also figures out exactly why the game developers gave him the limitless storage skill at this specific level. He needs to carry hundreds of magic stones at all times to constantly spawn, fuse, and maintain his massive army of creatures. He smiles confidently as he realizes his unique class is completely overpowered. He declares that his unrivaled army can overcome any dangerous situation and easily crush any enemy in his path, making him far stronger than even the terrifying Demon Lord. Village Chief Deboji calls Roden, Gerda, and Alan for a meeting and explains that Baron Granvelle is visiting next month. The chief wants Alan to serve as a tour guide for the Baron during his stay. Alan initially refuses the offer, stating he does not want to entertain a noble for free and believes the chief is just bribing him with fruit. Deboji explains he cannot ask his own son because the boy is not suited for the task, while Alan's clever ideas led to the massive success of their past hunts. Roden tells Alan he can refuse, but he reminds him that the Baron has the authority to gift people with commoner status. Alan realizes this is his only chance to escape his life as a serf, which would normally take 10 years of hunting to achieve. Hearing this, Alan eagerly accepts the job. A month later, the Baron arrives in the village riding in a grand carriage surrounded by armored knights. He steps out alongside his daughter Cecil, his head knight Xenoph, and his loyal butler Sebas. Deboji welcomes the Baron warmly, and the Baron thanks him for his hard work in establishing Krena village. Later that evening, the group gathers in the guest hall for a lavish dinner. The Baron apologizes for demanding 20 boars this year, explaining he could not refuse a direct order from the king after another noble brought up the successful hunts at court. They begin to eat, and Cecil is absolutely amazed by the delicious meat. Alan steps forward and explains that the dish is made from a fresh albaharon hunted just yesterday. He lists the ingredients, noting it uses breast meat, thigh meat, and liver flavored with herbs. Xenoph recognizes Alan's black hair and eyes, realizing he is Roden's son. He praises Alan for his excellent manners and asks if his family has a background in the knighthood. Deboji clarifies that Alan actually comes from a family of lowly serfs. Hearing this, Cecil throws a massive fit. She slams her hands on the table and screams at the chief for allowing a filthy serf into the guest hall. The Baron quickly scolds his daughter, reminding her that serfs are fair members of their fiefdom and should never be treated like animals. Cecil immediately apologizes. Xenoph then changes the subject and tells Alan he expects him to explain the finer details of the hunt tomorrow. Xenoph mentions that wrangling 20 boars in 1 year is a very steep goal and states that if the serfs prove too weak to handle it, his fully trained knights will take over the hunts. Cecil gets extremely excited at the idea, claiming she would love to see the knights slay a great boar. Alan feels insulted by their lack of faith in his village. He confidently tells Xenoph that a quota of 20 boars is actually a paltry number and promises their performance tomorrow will completely convince the Baron of their skills. The next morning, the Baron leaves Cecil under Xenoph's protection, and the group travels to a tall wooden watchtower located right at the edge of the hunting forest. Alan welcomes them and guides them up to the balcony, providing a perfect view of the sandy arena below. Down in the clearing, the hunters arrive wearing specialized armor. Alan explains that the villagers forged this armor using leftover pelts, bones, and fangs from the boars they hunted last year. The Baron is impressed. They repurposed the monster parts so effectively. The hunt officially begins as the lightly equipped bait team runs into the dense forest to lure the monsters out. Moments later, a massive brown boar with glowing red eyes charges out of the trees, aggressively chasing the bait team into the arena. The main hunting team immediately springs into action. 2 men carrying a massive wooden shield step forward and block the boar's path. Alan explains these large shields are crafted from 2 layers of the toughest hide found on a boar's back. The men use the shield to completely box the beast in, preventing it from charging any further. Next, the long spear team moves in. Alan notes this team consists of the least experienced members who just joined last year. The men thrust their spears forward to keep the monster restrained. Finally, the heavily armored frontliners charge in and repeatedly stab the boar in the neck, dealing a fatal blow. The boar collapses against the stone wall and dies instantly, spraying blood everywhere. Cecil covers her mouth in horror at the brutal scene, but the Baron and Xenoph are highly impressed by the serfs' flawless coordination. Just as the hunters celebrate their clean victory, 2 more bait members run out of the forest screaming in panic. They are being chased by 3 massive boars at the same time. Xenoph immediately panics and orders his knight to prepare for battle, believing the serfs are doomed. Alan calmly tells the knight to wait and assures them the hunting team is fully trained to handle these exact emergencies. Down in the arena, the hunters stick to their training and split into 2 separate groups. They use multiple shield walls to corral the charging boars and push them back. Alan explains that for the past 10 years, the serfs struggled to hunt efficiently due to their lack of proper armor. Because 60% of their meat is taken as a tax, they had very little left to trade for better equipment. However, by mastering this highly efficient shield wall strategy, they managed to create enough leeway to slowly upgrade their gear. The hunters prove his point by flawlessly trapping and killing all 3 boars without taking a single casualty. The hunters celebrate their incredible victory, and load the dead boars onto wooden frames to transport them back to the village. The Baron tells Alan his men are truly exceptional warriors. Alan proudly announces they have already hunted 10 boars this year, meaning they will easily meet the quota by next month. The Baron is thrilled to hear this and realizes his knights will not be needed. Seeing the Baron in a good mood, Alan asks for 2 special favors on behalf of the village. First, he asks for permission to construct 2 more shield walls so they can hunt even more efficiently next year. The Baron agrees immediately. Second, Alan asks for permission to trade their surplus boar meat for imported liquor. The Baron is confused by the request for alcohol. Alan explains that as the hunters kill more boars, the sudden abundance of meat will eventually cause its value to plummet. By trading the meat for imported liquor instead, they can completely prevent a market crash in the village. Xenoph points out that giving the hunters liquor will keep their morale high, which is essential since they risk their lives every single day. The Baron realizes the request is incredibly logical and grants them full permission to trade for liquor. He praises Alan for doing a splendid job as a guide. After the hunt concludes, the group prepares to head back. Cecil glares at Alan and acts incredibly snobby. She tells him he was just lucky to get any praise from her father and warns him not to let it go to his head. She climbs onto her horse and rides away with her butler. Alan rolls his eyes and thinks she is just a spoiled city girl. Later that day, the Baron holds an official audience with Rodan, Gerda, and Alan inside a grand room with red curtains. The Baron praises their amazing hunting skills and declares their accomplishments deserve to be rewarded. To their absolute shock, the Baron officially elevates Rodan, Gerda, and their entire families to commoner status. Alan celebrates wildly, throwing his fists in the air and cheering. He realizes that as a commoner, he is finally free to leave the village limits. He instantly plans to travel to the White Dragon Mountains to hunt legendary dragons and level up his character. The Baron then announces he will grant the same commoner status to any serf who has participated in the boar hunts for over 10 years. He orders Rodan to compile a list of eligible hunters. The Baron then mentions the king wants to promote Krenna village as a shining example for the rest of the kingdom, asking to hear the full history of how the boar hunts originally started. Rodan looks down sadly, so Gerda steps up and tells the story in his place. He explains that 13 years ago, about 100 serfs relocated to this area to help develop the land. After 6 months of grueling work, fall arrived, and a massive great boar suddenly attacked the village. The beast devoured all the wheat and potatoes they had saved for the winter. Because the serfs had already left their old homes, they had nowhere else to go and faced starvation. In that desperate moment, Rodan stepped up and proposed they hunt the boar for its meat. Back then, they had no armor or hunting knowledge. All the men banded together and fought the beast using only pickaxes and farming hoes. They somehow managed to kill the boar and even survived a trial of the gods, which healed their injuries. However, Rodan's closest friend was killed during the brutal battle. Gerda explains that Rodan still blames himself for his friend's death to this very day. The Baron listens intently and tells Rodan he should be incredibly proud of his actions, stating the village would have never survived without his bravery. To honor that past heroism, the Baron offers Rodan one more special reward and tells him to ask for whatever he wishes. Alan smiles and expects his dad to ask for more liquor. However, Rodan completely blindsides him. Rodan humbly asks the Baron to allow Alan to work at his noble estate, promising the boy's clever mind will make him a valuable asset. Alan internally panics and screams. He realizes that working at a noble estate will completely strip away his freedom and ruin his plans to hunt dragons. He desperately tries to think of an excuse to get out of the situation. The Baron thinks the offer over and agrees Alan is quite clever. However, the Baron decides a simple hallboy position is not enough. He officially appoints Alan as the manservant of the Granville family. Cecil, sitting next to her father, screams in absolute shock. She throws a massive tantrum, yelling that the idea of having a dirty serf living in her house makes her sick to her stomach. The butler calmly reminds her that Alan is officially a commoner now, but she remains furious. Meanwhile, Alan is sweating bullets and trying to find a way to reject the offer politely. Before he can say anything, Rodan places a heavy hand on his shoulder. Alan looks up and sees his father crying tears of joy, genuinely believing he just secured a bright future for his son. Seeing his dad so happy, Alan realizes he is completely trapped. He forces a smile and accepts the position as the Baron's manservant. A few days later, the time comes for Alan to leave the village. Inside his rustic home, his mother carefully adjusts his new black and green formal suit. Alan thanks her, and they walk outside to the dirt path where the entire village has gathered to see him off. His pink-haired friend Krina runs up to him holding a wooden training sword and asks for one final duel before he leaves. Alan happily accepts the challenge. Krina shouts her title as the Sword Lord and charges forward with all her might. Alan announces his new title as the Baron's manservant and meets her attack. The two kids clash their wooden swords fiercely in the middle of the open grassy field. The villagers watch the intense duel, amazed by their strength. Krina swings her sword aggressively, pushing Alan back. Alan grits his teeth and realizes Krina will eventually leave the village to study at the academy when she turns 12. He knows this might be the last time they ever see each other, so he decides to go all out. He secretly opens his status screen and uses all his saved magic stones to summon 20 copies of his bird creature, dumping every single stat point into agility. Suddenly, Alan moves with blinding speed. He completely overpowers Krina, striking her wooden sword with immense force. Krina stands frozen in shock, realizing she just lost a duel for the first time. The villagers drop their jaws in disbelief at Alan's sudden burst of power. Alan smiles warmly and tells Krina they should consider the match a draw. He promises they will settle the score properly the next time they meet. Krina smiles brightly and promises to win their next duel, shaking hands over their wooden swords to seal the promise. After the duel, Alan says his final goodbyes to the villagers. His mother's friend, Matilda, strokes his head affectionately while holding her new baby, Mayula. Alan smiles and tells his crying little brother Mash to step up and protect their mother and sister while he is away. Suddenly, Dagora, the blacksmith's son, jumps over the wooden fence. He clumsily trips and falls flat on his back, but quickly gets up and hands Alan a small dagger in an orange sheath. He tells Alan to take it as a parting gift. Alan is surprised by the generous gift, and the villagers laugh at Dagora's funny entrance. Alan packs his bags and begins the long walk toward the village gates with his parents. As they walk through the fields of red spider lilies, Rodin tells Alan that becoming a manservant is only the first step and encourages him to work hard so he can go places in life. His mother looks at him with concern and tells him to come straight home if things ever get too tough. Alan smiles brightly and promises to do his best to make them proud. They finally reach the large wooden gates where the Baron's red carriage and armored knights are waiting. Alan waves goodbye to his parents one last time and climbs into the carriage. The tall wooden gates slowly close behind him, separating him from his family and the only home he has ever known. As the carriage rolls through the green hills toward the Baron's estate, Alan looks out the window at the passing scenery and sheds a single tear as he quietly whispers a final goodbye to everyone. Alan starts his job at the Granville estate and immediately has to deal with the Baron's spoiled daughter Cecil. She takes him out to the gardens and uses him as a literal human stepping stone so she can reach a yellow fruit hanging from a tall tree. Alan hates being treated this way and seriously considers throwing her off his shoulders but holds his anger back. Cecil finally grabs the fruit and takes a bite, but she immediately spits it out because it tastes horribly sour. Alan casually mentions that fruits growing higher up tend to be sour, and Cecil gets furious that he did not warn her beforehand. She throws a tantrum and demands that he go all the way to the town market to buy her a sweet popo fruit to cleanse her palate. Alan agrees and heads out. On his way to the market, he looks up into the sky and is completely shocked to see a massive flying airship. He has heard about small tools powered by magic stones like clocks and lights, but he never imagined a massive ship could fly using magic. The next morning, Alan wakes up feeling incredibly refreshed even though he is sleeping on the floor of a dusty, cobweb-filled storage room. He notes that sleeping here is still a million times better than sleeping in terrible internet cafes in his past life. He breathes in the glowing green particles produced by his summoned plants to energize himself and gets ready for the day. He heads to the dining hall to eat a simple breakfast of soup and bread with the other servants. The head servant Rickle greets him and asks how he is getting along with Cecil. Alan admits it is a bit rough, and Rickle sympathizes with him, noting that being a manservant is a tough job. Alan asks Rickle about the difference between a manservant and a regular hall boy. Rickle explains the strict hierarchy of the estate. The senior staff includes the butler, the housekeeper, the valet, the lady-in-waiting, and the head chef. The lower ranks consist of the coachman, the cook, the gardener, the housemaid, and the manservant. Rickle points out that all of these roles are formally considered part of the noble family itself, whereas a hallboy is just an occasional helper with no real status. Hearing this, Alan is stunned. He suddenly realizes that this is exactly why his father cried tears of absolute joy when the Baron offered him the job. The position officially makes him part of a noble household. Later, Alan stands attentively in the dining room while the Granville family eats their meal. He notices that their food is quite simple and wonders if the Baron is just extremely frugal. The Baron and his wife praise Alan for his excellent manners and quick learning, noting that he acts incredibly refined for someone born as a common serf. The Baron mentions that it is a shame Alan has no special talent. Cecil immediately smirks and uses the opportunity to brag about her own abilities. She proudly announces that she is a wizardess with a 2-star talent rating. She also mentions that her older brother Mihai is a highly skilled swordsman. Hearing this, the youngest brother Thomas bursts into tears at the table. He is completely devastated because he does not have a talent and therefore cannot attend the prestigious academy city like his older brother. The Baron gently scolds Cecil for bragging and tries to comfort Thomas. He tells his crying son that he will be enrolled in the Nobles College in the royal capital instead. The Baron explains that he also lacked a special talent and attended the Nobles College, which is exactly where he met his wife and started their family. This cheers Thomas up a bit, and Cecil apologizes for making him cry. When Alan gets his afternoon off, he excitedly heads straight into the bustling town. He is amazed by the cobblestone streets and stone buildings, which look completely different from his rustic home village. He immediately searches for the Adventurers Guild and finds a large building decorated with weapon banners. He runs inside and walks right up to the receptionist counter. He asks the ginger-haired woman if he can register as an adventurer. She asks his age, and when he says he is 8, she gently rejects him, explaining that the minimum age to register is 12. Alan is devastated because he took the manservant job specifically to gain his freedom to hunt monsters. However, he refuses to give up and decides to gather information instead. He walks over to the large wooden bounty board and studies the monster posters. He sees bounties for D-rank goblins, horned rabbits, and big toads, as well as C-rank orcs and armored ants that pay 3 silver coins. A tall, muscular warrior with blue hair and facial scars named Raven notices Alan staring at the board and tells him the guild is not a playground. Alan apologizes but quickly asks Raven why the bounty posters do not list the exact spawn locations of the monsters. Raven explains that lower rank monsters can be found almost anywhere. Alan then asks how monster ranks are assigned. Raven tries to shoo him away, but Alan promises to leave if he answers. Raven gives in and explains that monster ranks increase the further you go from the town. Alan realizes that the most dangerous monsters live near the distant White Dragon Mountains. He points to a poster for a B-rank monster called a Murdergarsh with a 200 gold coin reward and asks why nobody hunts it. Raven says the monster is incredibly fast and deadly, making it a job better suited for the kingdom's knights. Alan then points to an A-rank White Dragon bounty worth 1,000 gold coins that has been active for decades. Raven explains that the dragon is terrifyingly powerful, but because the mountains are filled with valuable mithril deposits, the reward keeps climbing as people desperately want to mine the area. Alan realizes the mithril must be worth far more than the bounty itself. 2 other adventurers, a silver-haired girl named Rita and a pink-haired nun named Milsey, walk up to Raven and tell him they are done cashing in their bounties. Raven agrees to head to the pub, and Alan thanks him profusely for all the information. With his research complete, Alan waits until nightfall to begin his real plan. He runs through the dark, misty streets toward the town's main gate. A large armored guard stops him and demands to see a travel permit. Alan casually pulls out his silver Granville family crest medal. The guard immediately panics, apologizes for disrespecting a member of the noble household, and opens the massive gates without another word. Alan runs out into the night, absolutely thrilled that he can finally hunt monsters after waiting 8 years for this exact moment. He runs deep into the lush forest, making sure to stay within a 10-kilometer radius so he only encounters manageable D-rank monsters. Once he finds a good spot, he decides to test his summoning abilities. He opens his black floating grimoire and summons a black hawk named Hawkins. He checks the bird's stats and notes it has 150 intelligence, which makes it smart enough to understand basic directional orders. He summons 5 more hawks and commands them to use their Hawkeye skill to scout the area for monsters. Next, he tests a combat summon by bringing out a large yellow saber-toothed cat named Tama. He tries to give it an order, but the beast just rolls on its back. Alan realizes its intelligence stat of 28 is way too low to understand complex commands. Soon, one of his hawks returns and signals that it found targets. Alan follows the bird and spots a group of 5 muscular green goblins armed with swords and clubs. He summons 10 saber-toothed cats in total and commands them to attack. The cats easily overpower the goblins with their claws. However, one goblin manages to fight back, so Alan decides to test his insect summon. He brings out a massive, glowing butterfly named Papillon. The butterfly flies over the goblins and showers them with a glittering yellow sleep powder. The debuff works perfectly, and the goblins immediately fall asleep on the ground. Alan walks up and easily finishes them off with a small stone throw and his dagger. He kills the entire group and celebrates when his system notifies him that he earned 1,000 experience points. He realizes that farming multiple weak goblins is much faster and more efficient than fighting stronger solo monsters like the Great Boar. He uses his hawks to find more groups and spends the entire night grinding. By the end of his session, he slaughters 80 goblins and 5 horned rabbits, earning over 16,000 experience points and leveling up twice. He notes that the sleep powder has an 80% success rate on goblins and realizes he cannot use lower rank magic stones to create higher rank summons. When he tries to head back to town, he realizes his hawks are completely blind in the dark and cannot guide him. He gets completely lost in the woods but miraculously manages to stumble back to the city gates by morning. 1 month later, Alan is level 12 and continues his strategy of farming weak monsters for experience while gathering better equipment. He visits a weapon shop and buys 3 heavy iron balls for 60 silver coins to use as stronger projectiles. Later that night, when he returns to the mansion, the butler Sabas intercepts him and leads him into the Baron's grand office. The Baron sits behind his desk and praises Alan for doing an excellent job as a manservant over the past 2 months. However, he sternly questions why Alan always leaves the estate at dawn and returns late at night on his days off. Knowing he needs a good excuse, Alan claims that he goes out to the forest to hunt horned rabbits because the urge to hunt is in his blood as the son of Rodin the boar hunter. The Baron completely believes this lie, assuming Alan just cannot fight his nature. He then asks what Alan does with the rabbit meat. Alan lies again, saying he just throws it away. The Baron tells him he cannot sell it to a butcher anyway, as a noble servant acting like a common merchant would cause a massive scandal for the family. Instead, the Baron offers to buy the rabbit meat directly for the estate kitchens, offering 1 silver coin per bundle. Alan eagerly accepts the deal because it means he can now hunt openly without suspicion and make a steady income on the side. 6 months later, Alan is resting inside a hollowed tree trunk in the forest, eating an apple while reading his grimoire. His goal for the day is to farm 100 goblins and some rabbits for extra cash. He gives his hawks orders to find a group of at least 5 goblins within a 3-kilometer radius. However, the birds act very strangely. Instead of following his specific range limit, they fly away extremely fast, leading him incredibly deep into the misty woods. Alan chases after them, frustrated that they are ignoring his commands. The birds eventually lead him to a dark clearing where a brutal battle is taking place. Alan recognizes the 3 adventurers from the guild. Rita is desperately fighting off 4 green goblins with her daggers to protect her friends. Milsey is crying on the ground, completely unable to cast any spells because she is out of mana. Beside her lies Raven, who has a massive, gruesome wound ripped straight through his stomach. He is bleeding out rapidly and is clearly about to die. Seeing that his iron balls will not be enough to kill the goblins instantly, and not wanting to expose his summoning abilities to strangers, Alan draws his dagger and jumps into the fight. He tells Rita to handle 1 goblin while he takes the rest. Thanks to his high level and the passive stat boosts from his summons, his attack and agility are over 300. He easily dodges the goblins' heavy club swings and swiftly slices them down with his blade. Once the monsters are dead, Alan rushes over to Raven. He knows Raven will not survive the trip back to town, so he pulls out a special glowing green leaf from his grimoire. He explains it is a leaf of life created by one of his summons. He places the leaf directly onto Raven's horrific stomach wound. The leaf glows brightly, and the massive injury heals completely in an instant. Raven wakes up, shocked to be alive. Alan then uses another leaf to heal a deep scratch on Rita's leg. Rita and Milsey are absolutely stunned by the power of the healing items and realize Alan just used incredibly rare and expensive magic on them. They recognize him from the guild and beg to repay him with whatever he wants. Alan insists he just wants to get back to farming, but he asks them to keep his identity and abilities a total secret. To settle the debt, he requests that they gather 100 E-rank magic stones for him within a week, as he needs them for his summoning skills. Raven happily agrees, and the group waves goodbye as Alan runs back into the forest. Alone again, Alan analyzes the healing leaf's properties. He remembers that the Mullerze flower he used to heal his dad months ago restored a percentage of health, but he concludes that the leaf of life restores a massive fixed amount of health instead. He also checks his experience log and realizes he only got 160 experience points per goblin during that fight, which is 20% less than usual. This confirms his theory that experience points are split among party members when fighting together. He then confronts Hawkins, scolding the bird for ignoring his 3-kilometer range limit. The bird looks genuinely startled and confused. Alan suddenly realizes that his summons are not just mindless tools following programming. Hawkins is actually sapient and deliberately ignored the order because it sensed the adventurers were in mortal danger and wanted to save them. Deeply moved by the bird's empathy, Alan apologizes for yelling at it and affectionately praises Hawkins for being such a good and loyal companion. He is amazed at how incredible the summoned creatures in this world truly are. That night, back at the estate, Alan is in the dark, stone-walled pantry with Cecil. She is forcing him to carry her on his shoulders again so she can reach a high shelf. She wants a specific jar of jam to bake cookies for her older brother Mihai, who is returning home in the spring. Alan complains about being used as a ladder and jokingly tells Hawkins to dump her in a lake. As Cecil stretches for the jar, they both lose their balance and crash violently onto the dark wooden floor. The massive thud echoes through the entire mansion and wakes someone up. Knowing they will get in huge trouble, Alan quickly mimics a loud cat meow. The person hearing the noise simply assumes the estate cat knocked something over and goes right back to sleep. Alan is serving dinner at the Granville estate. The Baron praises the horned rabbit meat that Alan hunted and mentions that Krina village successfully met their quota of 20 great boars. Cecil complains about not having any boar meat for dinner this year. Alan explains that the king ordered them to hunt more boars, so all the meat got sent directly to the royal capital. Theron tells Cecil not to be selfish about the food. Thomas then asks Alan to hunt a white deer for them next time. Cecil gets angry and yells at Thomas because he has to go through her to give Alan any orders. The Baroness gently adds that hunting a white deer is a very tall order for a young boy. Alan immediately accepts the challenge. He knows that a white deer is a C-rank monster just like the great boars, and he absolutely loves a good challenge. He heads out into the snowy mountains to track down the beast. He eventually spots a massive white deer standing over some defeated goblins. He hides behind a tree and summons 4 colorful frogs. He commands the frogs to use their provoke skill. The frogs jump out and taunt the deer. The massive creature gets angry and charges at the frogs. Alan quickly recalls the summons back into his grimoire just before the deer can hit them. He repeats this process over and over. He summons the frogs to taunt the deer and then recalls them to keep the beast chasing him. He successfully lures the massive monster all the way to the town gates. The town guards panic and point their spears at the exhausted beast lying on the ground. Alan pops up from behind the deer and complains about how heavy it is. He presents the white deer to Thomas in the courtyard. The entire family is completely amazed by the catch. Cecil notes that they now have something special to serve for the new year. Sebas the butler thanks Alan and pays him for the hunt. Alan privately thinks that the monster is a huge pain to deal with and totally not worth the 2,500 experience points it provides. He vows never to hunt one again. Meanwhile, Sebas asks the Baron if they are absolutely certain that Alan has no talent. The Baron finds it hard to believe that an 8-year-old boy can hunt C-rank monsters so easily. He orders Sebas to investigate Alan immediately. A few days later, the Baron calls Alan into his office. He tells Alan that they are assigning him a new position as the official huntsman for the domain. His new duties include hunting monsters to provide food for the family and rescuing townsfolk from monster attacks. The Baron offers to pay him 100 silver coins a month, which is double his current wage. Alan is thrilled and thinks this is the best deal ever. He assumes he can just hunt enough monsters for the family's food and then spend the rest of his free time farming goblins for experience points. He eagerly accepts the title and says he will start tomorrow. The Baron quickly corrects him and states that nobody expects him to work as a huntsman every day. He must still continue his daily duties as Cecil's manservant and as a waiter. He only needs to work as a huntsman about once a week. Alan is extremely disappointed to hear this, but he hides his frustration and humbly agrees to carry out all his tasks. In the spring, a massive airship arrives in town. Cecil and Alan stand outside waiting for it to land. Cecil tells Alan to keep her homemade cookies a secret because she wants to surprise her brother Mihai. Mihai steps off the ship and greets his sister. He apologizes for breaking his promise to visit during the summer vacation. He notices Alan standing nearby and assumes he is a new servant. Alan introduces himself and says he has been serving the family since the fall. Cecil proudly brags that Alan is doing double duty as both a manservant and a huntsman. Mihai is impressed that Alan holds such a position at his age and calls him very gifted. Alan politely credits Cecil's gracious favor for his success. Mihai hands Cecil a green butterfly souvenir from the capital and she promises to treasure it forever. They all head back to the estate so Mihai can tell them stories about his time at the academy. A few days later, Alan is out hunting and successfully takes down a massive multicolored rooster. He brings the giant bird back to the estate. The head chef is very impressed with the large haul and notes that Alan even brought the big toad he requested. Alan then walks into the garden and sees Mihai sparring with the knight Xenoph. The rest of the family watches from the sidelines. Alan watches the duel and notes that Mihai is holding his own against the experienced knight. Xenoph eventually ends the match and praises Mihai for improving his skills over the past year. Cecil spots Alan returning with his catch and asks Xenoph to let Alan spar with Mihai. Alan is hesitant, but Xenoph hands him an ornate mithril sword. Alan gets excited to hold such a powerful weapon. He checks his status screen and notes that he is currently level 20 with his stats specifically maximized for hunting. His attack and agility are both over 300. He feels confident that he can win the duel. The fight begins and Alan charges forward. They clash swords, and Alan immediately realizes that Mihai hits incredibly hard. Alan decides to use his high agility to gain an advantage. He tries to outmaneuver Mihai with his speed, but Mihai easily blocks every strike. Alan is shocked to discover that Mihai is actually much faster than him too. Mihai effortlessly parries Alan's attacks and completely overpowers him. Alan quickly admits defeat. Mihai lowers his sword and praises Alan for being so skilled at his age. Alan realizes he never stood a chance because Mihai is in a completely different league. Mihai explains that he got much stronger because he cleared a dungeon over the summer. He explains that a dungeon is a maze filled with monsters, and he had to clear it to avoid getting expelled from the academy. He also mentions that he learned swordsmanship directly from Diverd the Sword Lord. Alan realizes that this is the true power of someone with a real talent dedicating a whole year to leveling up on a normal difficulty mode. Mihai promises to spar with Alan again next summer and asks him to take good care of Cecil. Alan agrees but privately feels frustrated. He wants to rise through the servant ranks and make a name for himself so he can hunt every day. He knows he has to find a way to quit his manservant job without bringing shame to his father. He realizes he needs to put in massive amounts of effort just to keep up with the talented nobles. Shortly after Viscount Carnell arrives at the Granville estate for a visit, he is an arrogant man who rules the neighboring domain. He sits at the dining table with the Baron and loudly praises the meat. He believes he is eating the famous Granville boar meat. Alan stands nearby and smirks because he knows the Viscount is actually eating regular horned rabbit. The Baron glares at the Viscount with pure hatred. Alan remembers that the Viscount is the one who snitched to the king about the boar hunts which caused the strict meat quota in the first place. The Viscount smugly asks for a second helping. Later, Rickle gives Alan a history lesson about the rivalry between the two domains. The White Dragon Mountains border both territories and are filled with valuable mithril deposits. However, a massive white dragon nests in the mountains and prevents anyone from mining the ore. The dragon is fickle and switches sides every 100 years. Currently, the dragon is nesting on the Granville side, which is causing their economy to suffer. A century ago, it nested on the Carnell side and caused them similar problems. Back in the dining room, the Viscount reveals the real reason for his visit. He announces that his youngest daughter recently took the appraisal ceremony and happily declares that she is completely talentless. The Baron looks down with a stern expression. The Viscount mocks the Baron because 2 of his 3 children have talents and must fulfill their noble duties. Alan is extremely confused by this exchange. In his experience, commoners and serfs are always overjoyed to receive a talent. He wonders why the nobles treat having a talent like a terrible burden. By October, Alan is 9 years old and gets a day off from his servant duties. He goes to the local tavern to meet with the adventurers Raven, Rita, and Milsey. He tells them that he wants to start hunting C-rank monsters further away from town. He explains that he has already killed 10,000 goblins and needs stronger enemies to keep leveling up. Raven warns him that even experienced adventurers can die from one mistake against C-rank monsters. Alan insists that he wants to learn as much as possible to stay safe. Rita suggests they go shopping for new gear first. They visit an armor shop filled with metal suits and helmets. Rita and Milsey tease Raven by suggesting he wear a pink skirt. A shopkeeper shows Alan a red cape with a black spiderweb design. She promises that it is very effective despite looking flimsy. Alan buys the cape and heads out into the forest. He loves getting new equipment just like in a video game. He runs deep into the woods and checks his status board. He is now level 24, and his enhanced skill is level 5, which doubles the stats of his summoned creatures. He spots a large reddish-brown orc sleeping against a tree. He immediately summons his Tama squad of yellow saber-toothed cats and orders them to attack. The cats ambush the sleeping orc and tear into it with their claws. They easily slaughter the monster in seconds. Alan receives 1,500 experience points and claims the orc's magic stone. He is thrilled that he can now defeat C-rank monsters without needing to use traps. However, he remembers his duel with Mihai and reminds himself to stay humble. He continues his hunt and soon encounters a giant armored ant. It is a massive insect with thick gray armor and red eyes. Alan knows from Raven that these ants are incredibly dangerous in swarms, but he is lucky to find one alone. He orders his cats to attack the ant. The cats pounce on the insect, but their claws just bounce right off its thick shell. They do absolutely 0 damage to the creature. Alan panics and quickly summons his papillon butterflies. He commands them to use their sleep powder skill. The butterflies sprinkle glowing yellow dust all over the giant ant. The debuff works perfectly and the ant falls unconscious. Alan jumps onto the sleeping monster's back and tries to stab it with his silver knife. He wants to dig out its magic stone, but his blade cannot pierce the incredibly hard armor. He screams in frustration and violently stabs the ant over and over again. He eventually manages to kill the beast and earns 3,000 experience points. However, he still cannot break through the shell to retrieve the valuable magic stone. He realizes that physical attacks are completely useless against this type of enemy. He assumes he needs to melt the armor with fire magic instead. He checks his stats again and notices that his intelligence is over 800. He concludes that with such a high intelligence stat, he must be able to cast powerful magic spells. A few days later, Alan meets with the family's magic tutor in the estate. The tutor is an old man with a long white beard and an eye patch. Alan asks the tutor to test his aptitude for magic. The tutor reminds Alan that he has no talent and therefore cannot use magic, but he agrees to perform the test anyway. He places a light blue crystal ball on the table and tells Alan to hold his hands over it. If the ball glows, it means Alan has the aptitude for magic. Alan eagerly focuses all his energy on the crystal ball. He hopes this test will finally reveal what kind of spells a summoner can use. He strains and pushes himself to the limit, but the crystal ball remains completely dark. The tutor plainly states that Alan does not have what it takes to cast spells. Cecil sits next to Alan and smugly points out that she told him so. Alan is absolutely furious and utterly confused. He has no idea what his massive intelligence stat is actually used for if he cannot cast a single spell. He loudly curses his situation and decides that the summoner class is just a complete garbage joke. Suddenly, a panicked servant bursts into the room and announces that a B-rank monster called a Murdergulch is heading straight for the city and will arrive at the south gate in less than 2 hours. Baron Granville is shocked and asks about Captain Zenoff, but the servant explains that the captain and his knights are away on a monster hunt and will not return for 2 days. The Baron orders his men to contact the Adventurers Guild to protect the city and evacuate the citizens immediately. Hearing this, Alan tells Cecil that he cannot just stand by because his duty is not only to be her manservant, but also the official huntsman of the Granville family. He heads to the town's bounty board and confirms that the Murdergulch is a B-rank monster worth 200 gold coins, which means the local adventurers have no real chance of defeating it. To make matters worse, Alan realizes his magic power is completely empty because he spent all morning using it to farm skill experience points. He rushes to the city gates where a massive crowd of panicked citizens and wagons are desperately trying to evacuate into the castle courtyard. The guards try to hold the line and hurry everyone inside, but a massive blue-furred monster with a mask-like face suddenly appears outside the metal gate. The creature starts eating people and horses right in front of the terrified crowd. Seeing the massacre, Alan knows he has to draw its attention away from the city. He grabs a black spherical object and throws it with all his might, hitting the giant beast directly in its bleeding eye socket. He insults the ugly monster and challenges it to catch him, successfully infuriating the creature. The beast immediately locks its focus onto Alan and chases him down a snow-dusted path away from the city walls. Alan decides to make himself bait and lure the monster toward the White Dragon Mountains, even though the guards yell at him that he is going to get killed. He runs through the forest as fast as he can, but the massive monster easily keeps up and plays with him, slamming its giant fists into the ground and sending rocks flying everywhere. Alan trips and falls, looking up in terror as the bloody-mouthed beast looms over him. He frantically checks his status board and is relieved to see his magic power has finally fully recovered. He quickly uses his grimoire to summon multiple mechanical butterflies and orders them to use their sleep powder to knock the monster out. The butterflies release glowing blue sparkles all over the beast's face, but the debuff has absolutely no effect. Alan figures the monster either has high resistance or his level is just too low. Realizing he cannot defeat the freak without weakening it first, he decides his only option is to keep running. He sprints through the dark forest for 3 days and 3 nights straight, constantly dodging the monster's massive attacks while using up a bunch of his magic stones just to stay alive. He finally manages to lose the beast and make it back to the city gates before collapsing from pure exhaustion. 3 days later, he wakes up in a comfortable bed inside the Granville estate. Cecil angrily yells at him for making her worry so much, but her eyes are filled with tears of relief. The Baron and his knights visit Alan's room to get a full report. Alan explains that he was not strong enough to kill the monster, so it took everything he had just to lead it far away into the mountains. The Baron praises Alan's courage and explains that his actions kept the city's casualties to a bare minimum while the knights were away. As a reward, the Baron gives Alan 10 gold coins from the Granville family and another 10 gold coins from a wealthy family he saved at the gates. Alan is thrilled with the massive payout and immediately uses the money to buy a high-quality mithril sword. He takes his new weapon out into the forest and easily slices through a giant insect monster, noting that the blade cuts like a hot knife through butter even though it still cannot pierce heavy armor. With his new gear tested, Alan decides to spend the rest of the day experimenting with his summon creatures. He summons a large hawk and has it fly away, instructing it to return when called. Next, he places a pink spiked fruit, a green wrapped package, and a brown nut on the grass. He summons a second hawk and asks it to identify which of the 3 items he has hidden inside a small brown pouch. The second hawk easily points to the correct item. Alan then recalls the first hawk and asks it the same question, and it also knows the answer. He realizes that this specific summon already knows the information. However, when he summons a completely different type of bird, a colorful pigeon, it has no idea what is in the bag. He creates a brand new hawk and asks it the question, and the newly created hawk instantly knows the answer. Alan deduces that his summoned beasts share a synchronized consciousness and update their collective knowledge whenever a new copy is created or summoned. However, this synchronization only works for copies of the exact same creature type, and already active summons cannot update their information in real time. He is amazed by this discovery because it means his summons are constantly learning and improving, essentially making them immortal beings with unlimited potential as long as he remains alive to resummon them. By early March, Alan turns 9 years old and continues his daily training. He engages in another friendly sword duel with Mihai on the mansion's lawn while Cecil and the Baron watch from the sidelines. Despite farming thousands of C-rank monsters and reaching level 28, Alan is completely overpowered once again. Mihai disarms him with ease, sending Alan's sword spinning into the air. The duel ends, and Cecil cheers for her older brother. Later, they all sit down for tea, and Alan complains that he still cannot win despite getting much stronger. Mihai praises Alan's toughness and admits that the young servant actually caught him off guard a few times, noting that Alan is much stronger than he was last year. He tells Alan to keep practicing his swordsmanship, and Alan frustratedly agrees. Suddenly, Xenoph bursts into the room with urgent news for the Baron. He reports that an A-rank white dragon has migrated away from their territory and moved over to the neighboring Carnell fiefdom. The Baron and his wife are absolutely ecstatic, because this means they can finally resume mining mithril in the mountains after a century of waiting. This will bring massive wealth and prosperity back to their domain. The Baron immediately orders Xenoph to have the knights locate the dragon's exact new nest and then check the status of the 4 abandoned mining sites. Xenoph agrees, but notes that they will first have to clear out all the high-ranking orc and goblin bases that have infested the area between the city and the mountains, which will take several months. Alan offers to help with the monster clearing, but the Baron strictly forbids it, warning that it would be disastrous if the white dragon suddenly returned. Mihai also tells Alan to stay focused on his studies instead. Alan is deeply disappointed because the knights clearing out the area means he will lose his best hunting grounds for farming experience points. He realizes he needs to formulate a new plan quickly so he does not fall behind in his leveling. He heads deep into the forest and opens his grimoire to check his updated stats. After over 2 years of relentless grinding, his summon, create, fuse, and enhance skills have all reached level 5, and his expansion skill is at level 4, allowing him to hold 50 cards in his inventory. This massive inventory increase gives him an even larger stat boost from his equipped cards. Most importantly, he has unlocked a brand new skill called Share. He decides to test it out right away and summons his trusty hawk. He activates the Share skill and is suddenly overwhelmed as his left eye glows red and his vision splits. He can simultaneously see his own perspective and the aerial view from the hawk flying high above the forest. He realizes he can also hear everything the bird hears and control its movements perfectly, making it feel like he has fully possessed the creature. He commands the hawk to use its special vision ability, and it works flawlessly. Curious about the skill's limits, Alan summons 3 more hawks and a yellow saber-toothed beast. He successfully shares his vision with all 5 creatures at once, feeling like a hardcore gamer multiboxing several characters at the same time. He tries to push his limits by summoning a 6th creature and activating the skill again, but a blinding headache immediately strikes him, forcing him to cancel the connection. He realizes that sharing with 6 summons causes him actual physical pain, leading him to believe that 5 is his absolute maximum limit since the share skill does not have a traditional level-up system. However, he quickly rethinks this theory, wondering if his massive intelligence stat dictates the limit. With his current buffs, his intelligence is over 1100, so he hypothesizes that he can control 1 extra summon for every 200 intelligence points he possesses. To test this, he creates several new bird cards that specifically buff his intelligence. He equips the cards and watches his intelligence stats soar past 1200. He tries the share skill again with 6 creatures, and this time it works perfectly without any pain. He is thrilled to finally understand the true purpose of the summoner class's incredibly high intelligence scaling. Eager to put his new knowledge to the test, Alan decides to create and summon his newly unlocked D-rank creatures. He summons a giant gray bear, a massive blue spider, an owl, an armored fish, a small plant sprout, and a golden knight. He checks their stats and notes that all of them, except the plant, start with over 100 intelligence, meaning they can easily understand his complex commands. Realizing he can now share his vision and issue precise orders to a small army, he decides to try hunting monsters using nothing but his summons. He spots a group of armored pillbug monsters and commands his giant spider to attack. The spider shoots thick webs that completely bind the enemies. Then, Alan orders his giant bear to crush the trapped bugs, and it easily tears them apart. He also uses his armored fish to cast an evasion buff on the entire squad. The new team makes short work of the C-rank monsters, proving that his telecommand hunting strategy is highly effective. Even better, he discovers that the little plant summon has an ability called Crop of Magic, which instantly restores 1000 points of his magic power. Having an actual mana recovery ability changes everything for his daily grind. With this perfect setup, Alan assigns the hawk to scout during the day and the owl to scout at night. The fish will provide continuous buffs, the spider will cast debuffs, and the bear will act as the main attacker. He successfully creates a system where he can farm experience points 24 hours a day without ever leaving the safety of his room. He strictly orders his summons to avoid all human adventurers and never fight back if attacked by a person. As he watches his squad head out into the forest, he thinks about the white dragon moving away and realizes his family back in Krina village is probably doing very well. He resolves to keep using his new farming method to earn more gold coins so he can send even more money back to his parents and his friends, ensuring they never have to struggle again. By October of the following year, Alan is now 10 years old and serving as a manservant at the Granville estate. In the dining room, Captain Xenoph reports to the Baron about the past 6 months of reconnaissance regarding the abandoned mines. Xenoph explains that the mines have become a nesting ground for monsters, specifically orcs and goblins, and that the nearby villages previously used for mithril refineries have also been completely taken over by the creatures. The Baron states that he wants the closest mine up and running immediately due to its extreme importance to their economy. Xenoph warns that it will take at least 3 years to properly clear the area. The Baron grows impatient with the timeline, but Xenoph reminds him that Viscount Carnell recently tried to push his own mining operations and incurred the wrath of the White Dragon, resulting in all of his miners being instantly turned to ash. The Baron agrees that they must proceed with caution and let the knights handle the monster extermination. Serving plates nearby, Alan listens closely and realizes that the knights are preparing to wipe out all the monsters. He decides he cannot let the knights hog all the experience points. With 2 years left before he turns 12 and leaves the Granville family to become an independent adventurer, Alan vows to spend that time exterminating the monsters himself. He heads out into the forest and uses his summons to clear out the local goblin burrows. He initially considers a classic gamer strategy of leaving the monster spawn points intact to farm experience points repeatedly. But after seeing human skeletons scattered around the camps, he realizes the goblins actively feed on humans. Alan decides to wipe them off the map entirely to prevent further casualties. He summons a giant blue and black spider named Spidey to shoot a double helix stream of thick yellow webbing, completely encasing the goblin archers stationed on their wooden watchtowers. He then commands his squadron of massive black bears with red chest markings, known as Teddy, to charge the camp. The bears easily tear through the wooden fences and slaughter the regular goblins, blocking the only exit to trap them inside. A massive goblin king wearing a gold crown and spiked necklace steps out to fight, but Alan remains completely confident because his bears have already defeated thousands of C-rank monsters. The bears effortlessly crush the goblin king into the dirt. Alan checks his floating black book and sees he earned over 48,000 experience points from the battle alone. He plans to wipe out all the goblin burrows one by one and eventually target the much stronger orc burrow. In March of the following year, Mihai graduates from the academy and returns to the Granville estate. Cecil excitedly greets her older brother, thrilled that he will be living with them again. Alan checks his stats and realizes that since he is now 10 years old, the age restrictions on his stats are completely gone, giving him the full benefits of his level 34 summoner class. He currently has 30 copies of his insect summons and 20 copies of his beast summons in his inventory. Knowing he's at his absolute best, Alan challenges Mihai to a duel with no holds barred. They fight on the lush green lawn outside the mansion, Alan uses his superior speed to attack, dashing across the grass and swinging his glowing blue sword repeatedly, but Mihai calmly blocks and dodges every strike using a small dagger and his own sword. Alan realizes his sword mastery skill level is too low to break through Mihai's expert defenses. Mihai easily disarms Alan, sending his sword flying and ending the duel. Alan accepts his defeat, wondering if he needs to boost his agility stat even higher. The Baron approaches and praises Mihai for his hard work at the academy, noting how skillful he has become. Cecil and the others suggest that Mihai should give Alan sword lessons since he is back home. However, Mihai suddenly turns serious and announces that he must leave the very next day to undertake the noble's duty. He reveals that he will not be coming home for at least 3 years. Cecil cries and begs him to stay, completely devastated by the sudden news. Alan suspects that the Baron knew this would happen all along because of the talent system, but he finds the whole concept of the noble's duty incredibly ominous. The next day, Mihai prepares to leave in a red and black horse-drawn carriage. Before stepping inside, he firmly grabs Alan's chin with his armored hands and tells him to watch over Cecil and keep her safe. Alan agrees to the request, but he notices that Mihai is trembling. The carriage drives away, leaving Cecil crying in the courtyard. By May, Alan reaches level 35 after successfully subjugating every goblin burrow in the area. He takes his army of golden armored knights, giant bears, and spiders to attack the main orc burrow. The orcs put up a much tougher fight than the goblins. Alan uses his golden knight summon, Brawn, to block incoming arrows with a massive shield while his bears engage the orcs in close combat. Suddenly, a massive pink and purple magical orb pulses with dark energy wisps and explodes in the middle of Alan's forces. Alan realizes the Orc King is accompanied by magic orcs casting powerful spells. The blast hits his forces in the rear, taking out Brawn instantly. Alan tries to retaliate by throwing his last 2 steel spheres at the magic orcs on a nearby cliff, squinting one eye to aim, but the creatures are smart and easily dodge the projectiles. The massive army of spear-wielding orcs charges forward. Alan retreats and slumps against a wooden structure, recovering his health while fires burn all around him. He realizes he has to turn the fight into a war of attrition, planning to use his massive stash of mana recovery fruits to endlessly summon over 20,000 bears until the orcs are completely overwhelmed. Before he can execute his plan, Captain Xenov suddenly appears, having investigated the thick smoke rising from the battle. Xeno sees Alan's summons and immediately realizes what is happening. Alan panics. Knowing his secret is exposed, Xenov ignores the summons and tells Vice Captain Leybrand to handle the regular orcs while he fights the Orc King. Xenov charges at the massive crowned Orc King and effortlessly parries the giant monster's battle axe strikes with his light blue sword. The magic orcs prepare another spell, but Xenov unleashes a massive explosion of blue magical energy from his black-shafted spear, obliterating the magic orcs and a huge chunk of the orc army in a blinding flash. Meanwhile, the vice captain leaps high into the air and slices another giant monster in half with a glowing blue energy blade. Alan is completely shocked by their overwhelming power, realizing the knights can defeat B-rank monsters in a single hit without even needing to use extra skills. Later that night, Alan and Xenov sit by a campfire in the dark forest, roasting meat on wooden skewers. Xenov reveals that he knew Alan was the one hunting the monsters because the carcasses outside the city were always stripped of their magic stones. Xenov points out that Alan single-handedly hunted a white deer and fought on par with Mihai, making it obvious he had a hidden talent. Xenov confirms he knows Alan controls the summoned beasts. He also reveals that the Baron already knows about Alan's talent, which is the real reason Alan was promoted to huntsman at such a young age. Xenov offers a deal, promising to keep Alan's specific abilities a secret from the Baron as long as Alan keeps him informed about his monster hunts so they do not interfere with the Knight's operations. Alan agrees to the terms. While wiping Xenov's back with a cloth, Alan notices the captain is covered in massive battle scars that never healed despite leveling up, making Alan realize just how incredibly dangerous the world truly is. 2 weeks later, Alan perfects his new farming strategy. He surrounds the orc camps with 40 bears at once, attacking from all sides to prevent the orcs from getting into formation. He then targets the magic orcs first until they are all dead. He successfully defeats another Orc King and earns over 335,000 experience points. Alan calculates that this method yields 7 times more experience than hunting goblins, fully embracing his hardcore gamer mindset to farm the area efficiently. In September, a royal messenger in black robes arrives at the Granville estate. The pale-skinned messenger sits at the dining table with the Baron, Cecil, and the other nobles, handing over a stack of papers which he identifies as Mihai's diary. The messenger then delivers the shocking news that Mihai carried out his mission dutifully and has been laid to rest. The Baron completely loses his temper, slamming the table and yelling that Mihai was fresh out of the academy. He angrily accuses the royal officials of using his son as fodder simply because they are lower-ranking nobles, demanding to know how such a tragedy could happen in only 6 months. Cecil sits at the table, completely devastated and crying at the loss of her brother. Standing nearby, Alan remembers Mihai trembling before he left and realizes with horror that Mihai actually knew he was going to die. Cecil asks her father what is going on, but the Baron refuses to answer in front of everyone and orders all the servants, including Alan, to leave the room so he can speak with Cecil alone. Later, Alan stands in the hallway holding a broom, watching the maids cry over Mihai's death. He talks with Thomas and wonders if the deadly duty is some unavoidable catch to being a noble that forces them to die young. Suddenly, Cecil bursts out of the room, looking deeply distressed. She tells Alan that the noble's duty is just an expectation for nobles to die for their country. The Baron yells for her to wait, but Cecil ignores him, climbs out of a glass window and runs away from the estate. The servants panic, realizing she is missing. Alan drops his broom, runs past the green hedges into the garden, and vows to find her no matter what, determined to keep the final promise he made to Mihai. Cecil runs through a dark cobblestone alleyway because she is too tired to keep walking. She stops near some barrels and looks at a green butterfly hair accessory. She cries over Mihai's death and feels terrified because they are sending her to a dangerous hotspot tomorrow. She believes she will not make it out alive. She just wants to go home to her family. Suddenly, Alan appears behind her. Cecil asks if he is there to drag her back home. Alan says he is just there to serve her. He pulls some food from his book and gives her some bread and pink fruit to eat. Cecil eats the fruit and starts crying again. She admits that she was never able to beat her brother in a fight and that the thought of dying terrifies her. She says she does not want to die. Alan asks if she wants to run away with him and leave the city behind so they can travel the world. Cecil thinks he is crazy and says they cannot do that. Alan suggests they wait until they turn 12 so they can register as adventurers. Cecil reminds him she has to enroll in the academy by then, but Alan tells her she does not have to go. He tells her it is her life and she should choose how she wants to live it. Cecil realizes she does not know what she actually wants. She remembers Mihai saying he fought because he chose to, not just for the family. Cecil makes her decision and tells Alan they are going home. She complains that her legs hurt and demands a piggyback ride. Alan agrees and carries her through the dark streets. They arrive at the large stone manor where the Baron and his wife are waiting. The Baron hugs Cecil and tells her not to worry about anything anymore. He promises that they will start mining mithril soon and he will use the profits to buy her an exemption from the noble's duty. He says he will handle all the negotiations so she can rest easy. Later, Cecil puts the green butterfly clip in her hair and spars with a white-haired girl in the courtyard. Cecil attacks the girl and declares that she will not run away from her responsibilities. She vows to follow in Mihai's footsteps and fulfill her noble's duty. 6 months pass and it is now March. Alan is 11 years old. He stands victorious over a pile of defeated monsters in the snow. He notes that life has returned to normal and the knights have wiped out all the orc burrows, mostly because Alan and his summons did all the hard work. Back at the manor, the Baron and Captain Zinoff discuss their plans. The Baron says they are finally moving people to resettle the mithril refineries and expects mining to run at full speed by summer. He is only worried that Viscount Carnell might lash out after losing his mithril access. Zinoff promises to stay vigilant. Meanwhile, Alan climbs a steep, rocky cliff in the mountains. He wants to wipe out the armored ants because they could cause problems for the mithril miners. He reaches the top and spots several giant bug monsters guarding a cave entrance. He knows the nest contains over 1,000 soldiers and a queen that constantly lays eggs. Because the cave entrance is too small, he decides to farm the ants outside. He summons a giant spider and a flying fish to help his bear summons fight the ants. A massive swarm of giant rolling armored ants rushes out of the cave. Alan summons his entire army of giant spiders and bears to clash with the rolling ants. The battle rages on, and Alan easily kills the monsters. A month passes. Alan stands on the rocky ledge looking exhausted. He complains that he has killed over 2,000 ants, but he still cannot clear the colony. He realizes the dead ant corpses keep disappearing from the cave entrance. A system notification shows him gaining tons of experience points, but he is annoyed that the endless stream of ants prevents him from entering the nest to collect their magic stones. Another month passes and Alan decides he needs a new strategy. He has killed 5,000 ants and wonders if he has to camp outside the cave every day. Suddenly, the ants stop coming out. Alan thinks his persistence finally paid off and decides to go after the queen. He summons a white owl named Hollow to share its vision and scout the dark cave. He uses the bird to navigate the massive maze-like tunnels. One of his owls gets ambushed and killed by a giant spider. Alan summons another owl and sends it down a different path. He maps out the cave in his book but finds controlling multiple birds mentally exhausting. Eventually, his owl finds the egg chamber filled with glowing green eggs and giant mechanical spiders. Alan finally reaches the end of the cave and finds the queen armored ant. She is a massive segmented insect surrounded by smaller pig-faced monsters. Alan orders his bear squad to take out the small monsters first. The bears charge forward and attack the pig monsters. The queen crawls along the wall and tries to escape. Alan summons a giant white worm with purple spots and a black wolf. The wolf destroys the smaller ants, while the bears swarm the giant white worm and bite into it relentlessly. The bears completely destroy the monster until it disintegrates into blue dust. The system notifies Alan that he defeated the queen and gained 45,000 experience points. Alan celebrates with his bear summons and notes that it only took 20 summons to win, compared to the 100 he needed for the Orc King. Since it is too late to return to the manor, Alan camps in the cave overnight. He finds a massive cluster of glowing blue crystals in the queen's chamber and decides to take it as proof of his victory. The next day, Alan returns to the manor and shows the queen's exoskeleton to Cecil, the Baron, and Xenoff. Cecil thinks he is lying about going to the mountains. The Baron and Xenoff are skeptical because defeating an entire ant colony is considered impossible. Alan explains that his summons made it possible. He then pulls out the glowing blue crystals. The Baron is shocked and immediately recognizes it as raw mithril ore. They go into the Baron's study to look at the map Alan drew. The Baron confirms that Alan found a brand new fifth vein of mithril. He forgives Alan for staying out all night and grants him a 30% stake in the mining rights as a reward. The butler tells Alan he will understand how huge this reward is in a few years. Alan realizes he is now set for life. October arrives and Alan turns 12. The mithril mines are officially running again. Alan works in the kitchen as a server and realizes he does not have to worry about monsters or money anymore. However, he feels unsatisfied with his comfortable life. He wants to experience hardcore gaming and live on the edge, so he decides to ask the Baron about quitting his job as a manservant. Suddenly, another servant rushes in and announces that the royal messenger has returned. Viscount Carnell also arrives with the messenger. Alan watches from the doorway as Carnell and the pale messenger present a proposal to the Baron. The messenger claims the royal family wants to stop the endless cycle of prosperity and decline caused by the White Dragon. He presents a contract forcing the Granville and Carnell families to co-manage the White Dragon Mountains and split all mithril profits equally. Carnell looks incredibly smug and reveals he already signed the contract. The Baron is furious because his family suffered for a century and now Carnell wants half of their new profit. The Baron refuses to sign immediately. He says he needs to visit the royal capital to investigate the situation first since Captain Xenoff is currently away in the mountains. Carnell gets angry and accuses the Baron of being blinded by greed. Carnell storms out of the room and slams the door. The Baron yells about the outrageous contract and decides to leave for the capital as soon as Xenoff returns in 2 days. Back in the kitchen, the head chef tells Alan that the co-management idea sounds good, but they cannot trust Carnell. Suddenly, Alan hears a commotion and runs upstairs. He finds the manor guards bleeding on the floor. He rushes into a room and sees that intruders have destroyed the wall and kidnapped Cecil. Alan quickly summons his blue-gemmed sword from his book and attacks the kidnappers. He fights a massive blonde man with an eye patch named Dagra. Dagra blocks Alan's attacks easily with a giant sword. Alan tries to hit him harder, but Dagra is too strong. The other kidnappers watch as Dagra overpowers Alan and knocks him out cold. Alan wakes up later and realizes he is tied up with thick ropes. He sees Cecil lying next to him, unconscious and gagged with bandages. He notices 3 of the kidnappers sitting nearby. The thugs talk about selling Alan as a slave because he knows how to use a sword. The pale, white-haired leader of the kidnappers walks over and punches one of the thugs in the stomach for talking back. The leader orders them to kill Alan immediately if he causes any problems and walks away. The thugs complain about their leader but admit he is a combat veteran and the only one strong enough to fight Captain Xenoff. Alan listens to their conversation and realizes he dropped his mithril sword during the fight. He only has a small dagger and some metal balls left in his inventory. He knows he cannot defeat the kidnappers and protect Cecil with just those weapons. When one of the thugs leaves to take a leak, Alan uses the opportunity to summon a small bird. He shares its vision to scout for an escape route. The bird flies through the corridors and Alan realizes they are not in a normal warehouse. The bird flies outside and Alan sees they are high up in the sky on a massive flying magic ship. He panics because he cannot escape in mid-air. He decides to wait until the ship descends. The bird continues flying through the ship and enters a luxurious dining room. It spots Viscount Carnell and the royal messenger drinking wine together in a lounge. Alan listens as Carnell laughs about pulling strings to get the mining rights. The messenger assures Carnell that the Baron received a warning letter against trying anything at the capital. Carnell states that if the Baron still refuses to sign the contract, they will cut off Cecil's hand and mail it to him. Alan is furious that they plan to mutilate Cecil just to steal the mining rights. He decides to stop them immediately. He opens his character stats and prepares to fight. He summons a massive butterfly with large eye patterns on its wings right inside the storage room. The kidnappers notice the butterfly and get confused. Alan orders the butterfly to release its sleeping powder. A thick cloud of glowing yellow sparkles fills the room and swirls around the thugs. Dagra tries to grab his knife, but the sleeping powder works instantly and all the kidnappers pass out on the floor. Alan prepares to break free from his ropes and launch his counterattack against the rest of the ship.